Someone, Gary, yeah. Okay. It might be a little late. Right. You're in the right place.
Yeah, but they put you in what? Yeah. Maybe it's one connection, and if not, we'll put a new strip.
You trust him?
There's a You see? It shines strong.
Yeah. But see, there's the big
Down. The rabbi want to talk.
Hopefully, Gary will be here. We may have accidentally mistakenly said 1:45 instead of 1:30. But we'll see. In the meantime, we'll stall and we can schmooze about the bear or about shrinking or whatever. What? I don't sing. Who sings? Wait, where? Oh, here. Does he have to stand?
He should be,
Well, he can be.
he can be all.
Okay, so I'll warm everybody up. I have no idea what Gary is going to be teaching other than the title on the goodness of creation. And I don't want to take anything from him, but I do want to ask. The ways in which God creates the world. What are some of the ways that God brings the world into being? All right, one of the things that God does is God speaks and the world comes into being. What else?
Can I say something very appropriate, but a little off the subject? God was the first thing that everything that had ever happened before him to last. He was the first, not the Alpha Omega, but the first to stay in existence longer than the others because he stayed and he's the first.
That's right. Ein Sof. There is nothing before God other than God. How else does God bring the world into being? Yeah, Renee? God separates, lahavdil. Okay, what else does God do to bring about the creation? Yeah, Tony?
God breathes into being. Very good. What does God breathe into being? Yes, us, human beings. What does it mean that God breathes into Adam's breath? What does that mean for us?
He breathed into the ball of the nose first, not all of them.
But what does that mean for us to say that we have been breathed into existence by God? Exactly. It means, Sheldon, that we have God's Spirit within each of us. What's the language of Breshit that is called that we possess God's Spirit? We are created, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. And it's an interesting word, Tselem. I'm just stalling for you, Gary. No, it's 1:30, but we wanted to trick you into... I'm stalling, so if you're here and ready. I like to say that the word Tselem comes from the root sel. And what is it, sel, in Hebrew? A what? A shadow, meaning that we are, exactly, that we are in the shadow of God. That just as God acts in creation and in life, so we have the potential to act in creation and in life in the very same way. And we have that because, as you just said, God breathed into us part of the godliness that is uniquely ours. Steve, last comment, and then I'm going to turn it over to Gary. That's true, right? God did create the earth as well, which allows us to exist both as combinations, right? Out of the earth, God created us, out of the dust, so that we are bound to that earth, and also the Spirit of God that was breathed into us. We have both of those. So Gary Shapiro is a teacher at De Toledo High School for the last
This is my 6th year.
sixth year. Before that, he was at Milken Community High School for about, a decade maybe? 9 years. And before that, he was a teacher at Pardes, with a short stint in Chicago, but a teacher at Pardes in Israel for about...
I taught there about
10 years. So you can see he's got consistency. Wherever he goes, people do not want to let him go because amongst the many gifts that Gary possesses, I think one of his primary outstanding gifts is his ability to teach Torah and connect with his students in a profound way. So, Gary, you have a choice. You can either stand over there with the microphone there and talk to everybody, or you can stand here in the front and talk to everybody. I have your source sheet, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Does everyone have a sheet?
Yeah. Who does not have a sheet? So if you're willing to share, are you okay to share? Thank you. And I'll just take a couple. Thank you.
A few extra.
Oh, Gary, here's the microphone.
I have.
Okay, raise your hand if you don't have to. Now I have plenty. You don't have to share anymore.
Hi, Laura.
Raise your hand if you need a source sheet. All right. Gemar Chatima Tova, everyone. It's good to see everyone. And a pleasure to be here, a real honor to be here. I want to thank Rabbi Kamras for inviting me. This is one of my favorite places to teach. Yom Kippur is a little bit more of a challenge, both for the teacher, I think, and for the students, the people listening and participating. I really, on that note, want to encourage everybody to feel free to raise your hand for questions, comments, ideas, feedback at any point throughout the teaching. I'd be happy to take that. If I can't get to you right now, I'll let you know, but otherwise, please feel free. I really like these learning sessions to be participatory, an exchange, not just any kind of straight-out lecture. So you're invited to be a full partner in this learning session. I want to start with the thought that the prayers, the services that we've been having this morning is a kind of affirmation. It's an affirmation of life. Would you agree? Doesn't it express a very profound love of life in Judaism? We're praying for life, we're seeking life. We're talking about changing our way of living in order to have life. Our constant refrain is Zochreinu L'chaim, in one form or another. Remember us for life. And the goodness of life, the importance of life in Judaism, and I guess I should stress, life in this world is very central to Judaism. Judaism does affirm another world. I always feel I have to remind people of this, because somewhere along the line, many Jews have gotten the impression that there isn't a belief in the world to come, in life after death, in Judaism. But there certainly is. If you were paying attention, it's the second blessing in the Amidah. We affirm the resurrection of the dead, for example. It's one of the expressions of future life for Judaism. But clearly, as we often hear rabbis say or we read in books, Judaism truly does emphasize life in this world, first and foremost. And on that note of the goodness of life, the significance of life for Judaism, I wanted to take a look today with you at the first chapter of Genesis, the very beginning of the Torah. Because Judaism's affirmation of the goodness of life goes back to the very first lines of the Torah, Bereshit Perek Aleph, Genesis 1, where the goodness of life is so fully affirmed. We're going to look at that. And this is where we'll start with the handout that you have. Who remembers that when God creates, God doesn't only do the acts of creation, but God assesses, evaluates his acts of creation? It was mentioned by Rabbi Kemmerer that I am a teacher, and especially in the high school setting. At Pardes in Israel, we didn't have to do that much there wasn't really grading there. But at the high school level, of course, there's grades. So in order to have grades, you have to have assessments. You have to have tests or evaluations or quizzes or projects or something. It can take many different forms. But God also assesses God's work in the first chapter of Genesis. Wouldn't you think that we should be able to take it for granted that God's work is good? That whatever God does, it's going to be good. It's going to be great. It's going to be excellent. It's going to be the best. But interestingly, God doesn't take it for granted. God looks at what God has done, and God assesses and evaluates. Who remembers that God looks at the things that God creates and says or sees that it was good? Vayar Elohim ki tov. God saw that it was good. And that happens every day of the creation. God looks and sees that what God has made is good. Well, almost every day of the creation. Almost every day. right? We're coming to that. Let's read about the second day of creation because it's irregular. It breaks the pattern. If you have read Genesis, and some of you have read it many, many, many times, we see that God says it is good over and over again. Of course, a little bit different at the very end. We'll come to that. But not on the second day. Can I get a volunteer to read the little passage, Genesis 1, 6 through 9, about the second day of creation? Who would like to read today? English is fine. English is fine. We could do both. I don't know if I should bring you the microphone or not for the viewing audience.
And God said, "Let there be a flat expanse within the waters, and let it divide between waters and waters." Then God made the flat expanse and divided between the waters that were below and the flat expanse and the waters that were above the flat expanse. And it was so. And God named the flat expanse heavens. There was evening and there was morning, a second day.
Excellent. Well done. You get an A on that. Speaking of evaluation. So what's missing from that? Pretty obvious. I've led up to it. It doesn't say here, and God saw it was good. The question is why? The question is, why didn't God say that? We are going to think today about the goodness of creation, but we're also going to think about the fact that at least one day of the creation was not declared good, and what that means. And we're going to try to see several solutions or suggestions for where that comes from or what that's about. Why God didn't look on the second day and declare that it was good. The theme of goodness and badness is very important. I'll just give this as a little aside, but it's connected. Is very significant in Genesis 1 through 3 and beyond, but in particular Genesis 1 through 3. We're going to talk about God declaring things good today and when God refrains from that. And we're going to talk about at the end when God looks at everything and declares it to be very good. We're probably not going to get to this today. I mean, it's not in my packet at any rate. Maybe on another occasion. But in the second chapter, does anyone know what the first thing is explicitly? I mean, we're getting to this idea that, well, God didn't call the second day good. So maybe there's something wrong with the second day or the things created on the second day. But what does God explicitly declare not to be good in chapter 2 of Genesis? Does anyone remember? God does call something not good. Everything else is pretty much called good. Yes, sir. Not exactly. Are you thinking of the tree? We do know that there's a tree of the knowledge of good and bad. I like to call it bad. Good and bad. It's the knowledge of those things, but it's not that the tree itself is bad. There is something, though, that God doesn't say is good. Yes?
Is it that Adam doesn't have a partner?
It's that Adam is, or the first human, whatever it was like, was alone. Was alone. Lo tov heyot ha'adam levado. It is not good for the human being to be alone. That's the first thing. It's fascinating. That's the first thing that's called not good. But there is this element of maybe the suggestion implicitly that the second day or something in it is not good. Now, before we go on and look at some of the answers, we're going to look at Rashi today. We're going to look at Kli Yakar today. We're going to look at Leo Strauss. These three thinkers are going to suggest reasons why God does not declare the second day good. But before that, 2 seconds, before that, we're going to look at an ancient translation of the Bible, known as the Septuagint. Our Bible, theoretically, where it did say the second day was good. Yes?
So it may be splitting hairs, but the failure to call something, failing to call it good, does that automatically mean it's bad? And also, if you say something is not good, does that also have to mean that it is bad, as opposed to just not so good?
Okay, so I am in support of these gradations of difference. I'm not saying it's exactly the same to not call something good as to call it not good. And I'm not saying that calling something not good is the same as calling it bad or evil. I'm not saying they're the same. But I think it's fair to say that not calling it good is not as good as calling it good. Yeah, it certainly stands out as being something missing or something that we were expecting. Maybe we weren't expecting it until the end, because it's only the second day. The first day, light was called good. Second day, it wasn't called good. Well, we don't know what's going to happen until we read further. So maybe it's only in retrospect at the end you go back and notice, hey, he didn't call the second day good. God didn't. But as I was saying, there is this translation, this ancient translation of the Torah, the Chumash, the Pentateuch, the first part of our Tanakh, which was done around the year 250 BCE. And it was done in Alexandria, Egypt. If you haven't heard of the Septuagint, this is hopefully a teeny bit of an introduction for you. There was an ancient community, a very important community. Maybe the historians among you know that Alexandria was a great city of learning in the ancient world. There was a massive library there. A lot, not just for Jews, but for everybody. And it's hard to believe, but Jews in the diaspora community there, outside the land of Israel, if you can believe it, their Hebrew wasn't great. They didn't necessarily have fluent Hebrew. So they needed a Greek translation. Greek was the common spoken language at the time. You'd think it would be Egyptian or something, right? It's in Egypt. But no, after Alexander the Great, this is Hellenism. The language of Greek was spread all through the Middle East, Asia Minor, parts of the ancient world, and the Jewish community there was a Greek-speaking community, and they translated their Bible into Greek. It's a story, it's an event that has a lot of legend surrounding it as well. It's referred to in the Talmud. The Talmud isn't so happy about the translation into Greek. But there are other ancient documents. It's called the Septuagint. What does septua mean? Sept. It means 7, right? Septuaginta means 70 in Latin, just to mix things up. And there's a legend that this translation into Greek of the Hebrew Bible, or let's say the Chumash for now, was done by 70 or 72 scholars. And they wanted to make sure that it was an excellent, perfect translation and endorsed by God. So they took, this is a legend that goes along with this story. It's hard to verify this historically. And they put, or the king, the Ptolemaic king, put each scholar, each of the 70 scholars, in a different room and said, translate the Torah of Moses, your master. And everyone translated independently, and lo and behold, miraculously, every translation came out exactly the same, word for word, according to this legend. I mean, you can see that that would be a miracle. There's no question that that would be a miracle.
You have free opinions, so no.
And even the things that they changed and didn't translate literally, because there's this tradition that they didn't, and we see this even the Septuagint that we have today, that they didn't translate certain things literally because they were afraid that non-Jews or even Jews would get the wrong impression of what was going on in the text. But even those changes they made identically. So that is the sort of miraculous legend that goes along with the story. But historically, we can say that it was translated at that time in Alexandria, Egypt. And as you can read here in the second source, it's obviously going to be a teeny bit different because of the different language. It's pretty similar, except for one glaring difference from our Hebrew text. I'll just read it because it's short.
How do we know that's the translation, since the original Septuagint was destroyed in the fire of the library?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. There
Do
were,
you have an original copy?
well, it depends what you mean by original. I'll address that in a second. Can I come back to that? It's an important question, though. I'm going to come right back to it. Let me just read the text here. And God named the firmness, what I translated as flat expanse for the word rakia. We'll come back to that. And God named the firmness. We're talking about the sky, basically. The sky, the heavens. God named the firmness heaven, and God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning a second day. Now, your name is? Sheldon. So Sheldon raised an interesting question about history and the timing of this. So it's not just about the Septuagint. It's also about the Torah. Do we have original texts of the Torah? No. The oldest manuscript, full manuscript that we have of the Torah, the oldest Torahs that we have, go back, I think it's the 10th century, CE, not BCE, CE. The texts of the Septuagint that we have are older than the oldest Hebrew manuscripts that we have. That is an interesting thing to keep in mind, and that relates to what I wanted to bring up right now, is why is this different? Why is an ancient Greek translation? You're right that there's no one text, because there are variations, there are different manuscripts. To some extent, that's true of the Torah as well. Why would it be different? Okay, what do you mean by lost in translation? It was a movie. I saw that one.
They've come up with a statement, and their feeling is everywhere else is saying it's good.
Okay,
They're looking at all the other days,
okay.
and they're going to say, well, God just forgot.
Interesting. So did some scribe fix it? That is one possibility. A Greek translator. I just told you that they changed the text in some places according to the tradition in order to prevent misunderstanding, etc. That is one possible solution. They changed it to make it in alignment with all the rest. What's another possibility? We're being very open-minded here.
The Torah was wrong.
Could there be, if we're being perfectly open-minded and not discounting any possibility, could the Torah texts have been mistaken or changed, or a mistake slipped into it somewhere along the line? Is that possible? Now, someone's beliefs may say that that's not possible, and unfortunately, there are other options. You don't have to believe that. You don't have to accept that. But if you're listing something from a more academic standpoint, that would be on the list, right? Every other day has it, and somehow it fell out. There are other places in the Torah.
Everything was copied by hand.
Yes?
A sleepy scribe could have forgotten to put that line in.
We know that the scribes were extraordinarily careful and that the Torah was written with great reverence and precision, but human beings are not perfect. I would question that particular thing if I was going to be, just because, if for no other reason, it's the second paragraph. I mean, if you're in the middle, if you're writing the sacrifices in Leviticus somewhere, and maybe I could understand somebody making a mistake. Like you're 5 lines into the Torah, and you're already making a mistake. I'm just saying, you could push back again. I know what you're saying, but you could push back against it that way. Are there any other possibilities? Are there any others? Yes. Okay, kind of going along with fixing it, like maybe it's an interpretation. Similar. Anything else that you can think of? There is one other possibility that is often brought up. Yes.
Well, when it was oral Torah first, so the game of telephone, I mean, you're gonna, I'm sure some of it.
So another way of saying it's a kind of mistake or oversight, but just putting it maybe in the oral tradition as opposed to the written tradition. It's interesting. That also is a subject of controversy. Was the Torah oral first or written first? And what does that mean exactly? If God dictated, the traditional view among many is that God dictated the Torah to Moses, so then it wasn't oral. It was written down, except through God's mouth, so to speak, and then it was written down based on God's words. But obviously, there are other views of how the Torah was transmitted. Were some of the stories of Genesis passed along orally before Mount Sinai? They're talking about events that happened well before Mount Sinai. Did you have another thesis?
Yeah, so if the Septuagint is actually correct, then it was an editorialization by the rabbis who wrote down the copies of the Torah that we're using since to make a point about the second day was incomplete, therefore it couldn't be good.
We're going to come back to that as a concept in a way, but not so much as a historical thing. It's a little bit, it would have to be introduced later in time. So you're saying later in time with the rabbis, it's a little bit hard to imagine the rabbis intentionally or scribes intentionally changing it at that late date, but theoretically possible. Yes, sure. Just going in all the directions. Yes, absolutely.
Perhaps the writers of the Septuagint just couldn't fathom that God didn't find this good.
Yes.
So put some words in God's mouth, so to speak.
Yeah. And made the
Of course, he meant to say this, but he was tired, he was busy, working hard.
yeah, similar.
And then it must have been good, because
Good.
it's heaven and earth, and how could this not be good?
Good. Similar to some other suggestions. The one that we haven't mentioned yet is the possibility that the translators of the Septuagint were working off of a different Hebrew text. All right. Somebody's paying attention here. Yes. It's the possibility. That doesn't mean that the Torah is wrong, not at all. In fact, it could mean the opposite of that, that maybe there were copies of the Torah that were not accurate, and that they were translating from those copies of the Torah. The traditional view is that there was a preserved, correct copy that was in the temple when the temple stood. And maybe over the course of time, I mean, the Jews have gone through a lot of things, as has been mentioned in services today. Maybe over the course of time, the Hebrew text, different versions of the Hebrew text arose. That's all in relation to the fact that you might have expected the Torah to look more like the Septuagint, where the second day is called good. You see what I'm saying? You might have expected that, but it's not. And there is a principle, to go back to this question of, well, what's the real version? There is a principle. It's a Latin concept. Medieval scholars came up with it originally. That goes, the more difficult reading is more likely to be true.
Is that with
And
respect to the Torah only?
no, respect to any document that you find, text that you're working with where there are different versions, how do you know which is right? One of the tools that scholars use is this idea that the reading that makes less sense is more likely to be true, because a scribe, as people were pointing to, is more likely to correct a text to make it make sense, to make it in line with standard beliefs, than to intentionally make something weird. So one possibility for defending the Torah text is, this is what you would not expect, so it's probably right. A scribe probably would want to fix it. on some level. So it must have been this way. That's one argument at least. Now, let's look. Part of how to figure this or think about this is, well, are there good reasons for not having it or not? Or can we not, does it not make any sense at all? We're going to see that scholars have suggested there are some pretty good reasons why the second day would not have been called good. Yes?
Was there only one version in the beginning, or were there various people created their own? In other words, was it just one group working on that, or were there 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 people who had their own concept of what the Torah was going to be?
Are you talking about the Torah, the Hebrew Bible? Well, it's very hard to answer that. The real answer, the answer that I'm probably obliged to give you is it depends on your beliefs. The traditional view, of course, the beginning of Pirkei Avot, Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, Moses received the Torah at Sinai and passed it along to Joshua, and Joshua to the elders, and the elders to the prophets, right, etc. There's no hands involved, just one set of hands. The rest are copyists. But of course, there are other academic, historical, documentary hypotheses. I mean, there's other points of view about how the Torah originated. Now, those other points of view do not necessarily mean, I'll just make a commercial message here for defending the sanctity of the Torah, even if you do believe that it comes from different sources and eventually came together as the Torah text, maybe in the time of Ezra. It's one kind of a theory. That doesn't mean anything, as Heschel kind of talks about indirectly, Abraham Joshua Heschel. That doesn't mean it wasn't inspired by God. That's a separate question. The question of coming from God, I believe, and Franz Rosenzweig spoke about this too, is different from the question of the historical transmission of the Torah, if you see what I'm saying. We can talk about that more at the end if people are more interested in that. Okay, let's look at some of the solutions that scholars have come up with, starting with, as we must, Rashi, the premier biblical commentator. He gives a reason. Why doesn't the second day say it was good? And it's a pretty logical reason. Could I get a reader? Great.
And why wasn't that it was good said on the second day? Because the work of the forming and arranging water was not completed until the third day. Although he began it on the second, and something which is not complete does not have its fullness and its goodness.
Great. Okay. Do you see what he's saying here? The work involving water wasn't finished. Well, at least you can't get an A, right? If it's not done, maybe you can't grade it, and if it's not done, it's not going to get a good grade. It can't be called good because it wasn't finished. And we're going to prove that that's true in a second. We're going to see how that's true. Something which is not complete does not have its fullness and its goodness. By the way, we didn't even raise the question, which we probably must. When God says that something was good, what does that mean exactly? What does it mean in the first place to call something good? I could have started with that question. Maybe I should have. What does it mean to call something good? So that's a subjective feeling about the artist or the creator that you're satisfied and not a statement about the thing. Okay, that's one approach. Other theories? It's functional. It performs its function the way it should.
That thing is objectively a good thing as opposed to subjective.
It's intrinsically good. Can we add to that at all? In what way is it good?
I mean, it could be, it could be it serves, it does what it was meant to do.
Uh-huh.
Or it could be that it's actually like morally weighted good.
A moral goodness, we know, if you read Plato at all, you know that goodness can be divided into many different types. What were you going to say?
I think that it's good because
Okay, again, this is what God wanted. God was satisfied. God expected it.
Okay, this sounds a little bit off the wall, but I'm wondering, could it be that God had tried a couple of different, exactly, and that finally, he got to that one and he went, okay, this is good.
Yeah, very interesting. It's hard to extract that from the Torah per se, but there is a midrash, if I'm not mistaken, that before God created this world, God created or tried 310 times, corresponding to the word yesh. Gematria, Sheen is 300 and Yud is 10. Yesh, right? There is existence. 310 worlds before ours. So it goes along with what you're saying. Now, what that means and why God would have to try so many times is a fascinating idea. You had something? Okay. Good meaning finished. And all of this was kind of leading up to what Rashi says. That seems to be sort of Rashi's take, or at least part of Rashi's take. He might not be saying good is just about completeness or finishing, but it seems to be an aspect of it. It's done, it's whole, it's complete. Maybe that's the meaning of goodness, at least, or especially in the view of Rashi. Does that make sense to people? That in order for something to be truly good, it has to have a sense of fullness or wholeness or completion. I mean, there are teachings in Judaism that can challenge that. It's interesting to think about this on Yom Kippur. Because we're not complete. We're not perfectly whole or full, right? We're filled with mistakes and problems and incompleteness and suffering and different things. So I'm not saying this is the only way to look at something, as it has to be complete to be good. Maybe there's a completeness even in your brokenness, right? Ein shalem, someone quoted this to me recently online. Ein shalem kelev shavur. Have you ever heard this expression? There's nothing whole like a broken heart. Have you heard this before? You had something? Oh, yes, you.
It seems a little bit of a circular argument, though, when it's a first impression, he is creating it.
Yeah.
To define its completion. There's nothing to compare. Like, I could say, oh, an apple without its skin might not really be an apple, but that's because apples already exist.
Yeah.
So I would know its completion.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, it's a relative, for us, in our finiteness, but I mean,
Yeah.
he's creating it. So
Yeah. I mean, you could say God has an overview, like a human couldn't, but I think what you're saying is valid. I was going to say good for a second. I think it's valid, especially in light of the fact that it's not till the end, right? It's not till day 6 that God declares everything very good. So that could be going right along with what you're saying, is that the full sense of wholeness only comes at the end. But you're making a strong point.
he's the one who has to declare. It's like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? He's saying, this is the thing I wanted.
I see.
Completion,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Who's
Yes.
God talking to?
Good question. Who's God talking to in Genesis? I guess we have to say himself, herself,
Well, the
God's
Midrash
self.
says- The Midrash says that in the previous worlds, one of them was all Malachim. And God got bored because the Malachim don't have free will. And so this world of ours has people in it with free will. Malachim thought that was a terrible idea. So I'm thinking God is saying, announcing to the Malachim, who were not so in favor of this creation, hey, that's good, that's good, that's good. Oh, this is very good.
It's interesting. There are traditions that God addresses this is going to be double microphone. That God addresses the angels, the malachim. Could it be the angels? It's kind of a complicated question because it's interesting to me that the Torah does not describe angels. Angels are not created explicitly, at least. And maybe especially on the first day, there's an idea that On the first day, the angels had not been created yet. And God did say it was good on the first day, too. Because God alone operates. We don't want to get confused. It's not the angels were involved in creating the world. But it could be the angels. It could be the heavenly court, in theory. Is it for the benefit of the audience? The reading, is that what you were going to say? Go ahead. For the people, was it said out loud, so to speak, for the people who are going to be reading it in the future? Al Shem Ha'atid, as the commentators say sometimes. For the sake of the future, yes.
Yeah, all this discussion is that the Kitov might be in the wrong spot. What if it's Vayiboker Vayir Yom Sheni is the thing that's in the wrong spot?
Then wouldn't we run out of days in the end, though?
No, I mean, it moved Vayir Vayiboker Yom Sheni.
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. That's interesting. That's interesting. We could have said this earlier. Is it that, especially in line with Rashi, where the work of water isn't completed until the third day, could that statement about when the second day was really over, that's nice, come a couple verses later? Possible, sure, since we're putting all the possibilities on the table. Nice. Okay, so that is one view. Now we're going to turn, and we need a really, well, we're going to verify. Let's trust but verify that it's true that on the third day, the work of water is called good. Can I get another reader, volunteer? Anyone? Oh, wow. Okay. So this gives me a chance to be like the old Phil Donahue show. Okay, you're going to be loud. All right.
And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God named the dry land earth, and the gathering of waters he named seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth give forth vegetation, green plants producing seed, fruit trees making fruit of its own type, which contains its own seed on the earth. And it was so. For the earth brought forth vegetation, green plants producing seed of their own type, and trees making fruit, which contains its own seed of their own type. And God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, the third day.
Beautiful. Well done. How many people here are familiar with the fact that there is a custom, I don't know if it's followed so much anymore, but there definitely was and is a custom to get married on Tuesdays. Has anyone heard that? It's still pretty common in certain communities. And what's the reason for that custom? Yeah, this passage that was just read here. Pa'amayim ki tov, as it's usually summarized. Because God says twice on the third day that it was good. So the idea is that Tuesdays have a special blessing of goodness associated with them. So a very fitting time to get married. But now we can sort of parse that out a little bit more. What's the first goodness for? The first God seeing that it was good, at least according to Rashi. It's the completion of that act of finishing the waters. So the declaration of goodness doesn't go by days. It goes by actions, creative actions. And then, why does God repeat it at the end of the third day?
He finished the plants.
Because of a separate work of creation, the creation of plants and herbs and spices, fruits, the vegetation of the earth. Okay, so you can see what Rashi meant now, right? Is it clear to everybody? What does it mean that it's not finished? And then when it is finished, it's declared good. So it turns out that on day 3, you have 2 proclamations of the goodness of God's work. Okay, that's Rashi. We're now going to read and think about another commentary, Kli Yakar. We're a little bit later in time, 16th century into the 17th century, an Eastern European rabbinic scholar, has really interesting Torah commentary, in my view. And he says something here that I think is especially pertinent for our day, our culture, our country, our situation, our world. I mean, look, every generation lives in a certain time. And often, everybody in their generation thinks that what's happening in their generation is pretty unique because it's their generation. So I want to be careful about that. I'm not saying that, wow, this is the most, our situation's never been like this before or anything. Even in America, I don't want to say that some of the issues that we're dealing with have never come up before. But I do think that this commentary is really important in terms of maybe learning a social or moral lesson. But we'll mix it up and see what we think about this. I get the sense that Joel is willing to help me out here with the microphone.
We are live streaming this, so if you're
Yeah.
reading stuff, you really do need to mic for those who are at home.
Yeah, it would help us in that respect. Thank you so much, Joel. Now, this needs a brave reader because it's a long passage and there's some big words in here. Okay, Joel, would you come up here? Front row. Ellen.
I just used your mic.
Doesn't matter. He took the trouble, so.
And God named the flat expanse heavens. Adonai did not want it to be called by the name Rakiah, since that name associates separation and divisiveness with what forms a flat covering over the earth, as in the language of Exodus 39:3, and they flattened out sheets of gold for the high priest's mantle. For every rakiah is a covering dividing between two things, and for this reason, that it was good was not said on the second day, since divisiveness was created on it. For there's no goodness except in the place where unity is found, and therefore on the third day that it was good is said twice, once for the work of the third day itself, and once for the completion of the work of forming and arranging water that was started on the second day, because it contains a dimension of unity, as it is stated on the third day, let the waters be gathered together into one place. And on account of this unity, the text noted that it was good. But on the second day from which all discord derives, and it is the beginning of all discord and divisiveness, that it was good is not said.
Very nice. Well done. All right. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty profound, I think. It feels a little bit Kabbalistic almost to me in some respects. Do people know this word rakia? Okay, so I didn't want to translate it because it kind of defeats the purpose to translate it, because he's explaining what he thinks it means. Rakia is that word for what I translated in the first batch as this flat expanse. You could just translate it as the heavens. In the old translation, you may be familiar, is the firmament. Has anyone ever heard the term firmament? So that's this thing, rakia. It's probably, look, we have to keep in mind that our conception of science is different than in the ancient world. How did people think about the sky? What did they think the sky was made of? They might have thought it, yes. Well, what you're saying is very relevant, right? Because we just read, she said, didn't they think it was like kind of an ocean up there? And we just read that there are waters above and waters below. That's what God separated. That's what the rakia separates. So it's not necessarily that the rakia itself is an ocean. Maybe it holds back the ocean. Maybe it's a flat plate. We can't, it's hard to be 100% sure.
Mayim has the root mayim in it.
Maybe. Yes, people say that. People do say that. People say it comes from the idea, sham mayim. Up there is water, shamayim, shamayim. Possibly. But the idea of a flat plate, something that's pounded out, and he points to that. There are other places in the Torah where the verb for this is used, where it looks like something is pounded out flat. So there is an idea that maybe what people thought of, it makes sense, is that there was a flat plate above us, maybe translucent, Maybe you could see the ocean right behind it. Maybe it's transparent. And you could see it. And then what happened when the flood came? It's opened up. That plate is like broken open, or there are windows in it, and they're opened in the flood. That's kind of how later parts of Genesis describe it. So that's the rakia that he's talking about. It divides. Why? Who can summarize now? We just read it through, but there's a lot of words there. Who can summarize? Why did God not say that the creation of the heavens or the heavenly expanse was good? Why wasn't it called good? I really appreciate the people who are making so many comments. I just have this teacherly impulse to say, if there's anybody, I want to get everybody involved as much as possible. If there's anybody else who hasn't commented, yes? Division. It created separation and division that did not exist before. In fact, he goes on to say it introduces the principle of division. This is like the Kabbalistic part, that at least in feel to me. God introduced distinction. Now, when I read this, I kind of wondered, well, wait, didn't God kind of do that when God separated the light from the darkness? Doesn't that kind of introduce division too? So maybe that's more conceptual, and maybe he saw this as being more physical, or maybe he's trying to solve a problem, and so this appealed to him more in this day than in the day before. But it's suggesting that the very notion that creation has distinctions and divisions had to be introduced by God. This is important because it probably, right, there's this idea, speaking of the angels, right? We say, Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, right? The one who makes shalom, wholeness, completeness, above, we pray for it to be made on earth, because we have divisiveness. In the heavens, presumably, they don't. When you have a finite physical world, there have to be distinctions. Otherwise, it's not a finite material world.
So a human looking up sees stars.
At night,
They're not mentioned.
yet.
That's the next
We're
one.
coming to that.
Oh, that's the next one. So here the waters are just there, and they may be seen as hiding
Yes.
stars.
Okay.
So it's not.
Yes, all good thoughts. We're going to see where the stars come in. We're going to talk about that in a few moments. Why did the third day deserve? We're still having division, aren't we? Why does the third day, according to the Kliyakar, this commentary, get to have the declaration, it was good? Look back at the text if you need to. Why is that day okay, Al?
If they're saying that third day is completion, the second day is not, it's still in progress, then that third day is the judgment of what came before in totality. So you have it being good, describing all of it.
Okay, nice. Now, I think that is a restatement. I think it's a restatement pretty much of the Rashi idea. And it's a very good restatement. I'm glad we reviewed that. But I think the Kliyakar's adding something that Rashi did not say. What allows for that third day to have goodness? And it must have something to do with this issue of separation and divisiveness. Look at the text again. It's toward the end of the page 2. Yes.
Well, initially,
Sandy.
the thought is that division is not good,
Yes.
which, again, I think words matter, so division versus divisiveness.
Okay, fair enough.
One being intent, divisiveness suggests intent as opposed to just the fact of life. But at the end of the third day,
Yes.
there's a realization that in fact division doesn't have to be inherently bad, that division created something good, that up till that point, they thought, once we divide, we are separating entities, and we don't think it looks good. And then wait, we've got both a heaven and an earth, and this is pretty good, because we have two entities for the people who that aren't there yet, but they will come to.
I like
have
what
a
you're
place to
saying.
be and a place to admire, if you will.
I like what you're saying. It's very nice, Sandy. We're gonna hold it in place as a good contribution.
Or not.
No. I'm not. I'm just saying it. We can say good things too, not just the classical commentators. But he makes a slightly different point.
It says here, wait a second, I lost my place. There is no goodness except in the place where unity is found, and therefore, on the third day, that it was good is said twice, once for the work of the third day, and once for the completion of the work, forming the waters on the second day, because there was unity. There was now a group effort.
Keep reading. A little bit more.
It contains the dimension of unity, as it is stated on the third day, let the waters be gathered together in one place, and on account.
Okay, we can stop there. Yes, good. He points to the fact that part of what God does to finish off the work of the water is he gathers the water together into one place. That's a symbol of unity. The dividing between the upper waters and the lower waters is a symbol of divisiveness, division. And even if there's good division, division that's good can lead to divisiveness. But it's redeemed, I would say. The third day is kind of redeemed because God gathers the water all together into one place so the dry land can appear. And that coming together of the water is a symbol of unity. Now, I suggested that this is especially important in our time. We know we're living in very divisive times. In our country, in our world, again, maybe the world has always been divisive in different important ways. I'm not saying it's worse than ever before. But it's pretty bad at times. And this is a good reminder, I think. This is a good, deep Torah commentary that goodness is related in some basic way to harmony, to togetherness, to unity. Now, God created the second day. So apparently it was necessary. God doesn't refrain from creating separation or division. It's part of the whole. And at the end, God looked at everything, and it was all very good. So apparently, I'm not going to the extreme of saying, this is not a kumbaya, we always have to be together on every issue. Not saying that at all. In fact, I could give a whole nother lesson in class, and I'm sure people have, that express the importance of machloket, the importance of disagreement, the importance of differing opinions. But it's a balance. We need the unity element also in order to have true goodness, I think, at the final end of the day. He's reminding us of that important idea. Now, yes, thank you.
Yeah, the whole concept, though, that better? Okay. The whole concept that I still haven't dealt with is
Yes.
the fact that it wasn't completed after the second day. It doesn't seem that it's just part of what was going to happen, and obviously with the third day they would move forward, but to say it wasn't good after, it's not like they were finished after the second day, so I don't understand why you'd say it wasn't good, it just wasn't completed.
Okay, so maybe I misspoke or overspoke, it's possible. I'm not literally saying it's bad, but I am saying that God did not declare it good. We see that God did not declare it good, and every other day is declared good. The work of that day is declared good.
But whether it was just
Yes, so there's two different views we've seen so far. And then we're going to see a third. The first is Rashi saying it just wasn't completed. There's nothing really wrong with it. That's Rashi's view. But Kliyakar that we just read has a different view. He says something difficult or problematic or challenging or potentially bad was introduced into the universe. That is the principle of separation. Maybe it's necessary, maybe it's needed for the big picture, but it is still the source of fundamental wrong, and therefore God did not declare it good. Now, there's a whole other approach, which is much more modern and is super interesting. And this was done by a Jewish thinker, an important Jewish thinker and scholar in the 20th century, Leo Strauss. Strauss is a whole interesting figure that, you know, we could spend a lot of time talking about. He specialized in the study of philosophic text, political philosophy, including Plato, Aristotle, and other classics. But he was also very interested in medieval Jewish thought, medieval thought in general. He was a Maimonides scholar as well, and a very careful reader of the Torah. Very careful reader in general, and a very careful reader of including the Torah too. And he has a different theory of why God did not declare the second day, the creation of the sky, the heavens, good. Let's read about it. It's short. He packs a lot in here. Who would like to read on the interpretation of Genesis? This comes from an essay that Strauss wrote in 1957. Thank you.
Almost all things are called good by God. The only ones accepted are heaven and man. But one can say that it was not necessary to call man good explicitly, because man is the only being created in the image of God, and because man is blessed by God. However this may be, certainly the only thing which is not called good without being redeemed, as it were, by being blessed by God, or by being said to be created in the image of God, is heaven. We may say that the concern of the author of this chapter, Genesis 1, is a depreciation or a demotion of heaven.
Well done. According to Strauss, our Hebrew text is absolutely correct. Pay no attention to that Greek translation because it's extremely meaningful. Not calling the second day good, or the work of the second day, the creation of the sky, good. Because, as Strauss says elsewhere, and I was looking for it, and I couldn't find the exact words. But I'm still sure, even though ChatGPT was trying to convince me otherwise, I'm still sure that somewhere Strauss says the Hebrew Bible was the greatest effort ever made to demote the heavens, to forbid the heavens from being worshipped. And the reason that God did not declare the second day good is because that's the day that the heavenly firmament was created. Now, let's support Strauss. Where else do we see, can anybody think of another example in the first chapter of Genesis which depreciates the value of what's up there in the sky? Can you think of any other evidence for this same thesis? There is. Michael?
The gag order, so let me.
Okay.
Here I can make myself totally
Whatever
clear.
is comfortable for you.
I'm going to handle it. Something has to come as it came to being, came into being,
Yes.
came into, came awake to being. So when God made the heavens, or had the heavens, it was fire and ice,
According to the Midrash. Mm-hmm.
and day, and the second portion is the earth. And I don't know if there is something called
Haaretz.
light and tree. Would that be light and tree or eggs?
Very word play-ish, sure.
More than that, maybe back to the second day. When it came, where did it come from? God asked for there to be light, and it was replied to him. Where did it come from?
Okay.
Future, maybe.
All right, let me pick up on that. The light. That is a really important theme of what I'm trying to bring out now. Everybody, think about this question. Where did the first light come from? No, let me ask a better question. Where did it not come from? It did not come from the sun. How do we know that? Because the sun and the moon and the stars were not created until the fourth day. What is the true source of light? When God creates the heavens, are the sun, moon, and stars created at the same time? No, not until the fourth day. How can you worship something or reverence something that isn't even created until the fourth day? It's like halfway through, over halfway through. So the light, the source of light, are not those entities up there. And people used to think, even in the Middle Ages, that they were like intellectual beings, living beings in some sense. They're not the source of light. Is there any other evidence for the depreciation of heaven? Yes.
Well, in the Yotzer Or prayer,
Uh-huh.
God Yotzer.
1 second.
Yiddish I learned a while ago. God Yotzer Or Uvarei Choshek. So the Yotzer is to shape or forms. We don't make a distinction like that in English. The word to create is reserved solely for God. So uvarei is a form of to create, borei, pretty often, right?
Yes.
So God is creating darkness, meaning that God's essence in this idea is light, and God needed to make darkness because darkness didn't exist because God was all light.
Okay, so there's a number of, thank you for that. There's a number of interesting pieces to this. It goes to the question of what we call creation ex nihilo, creation out of nothing, yesh me'ayin in Hebrew. If it's true yesh me'ayin, if it's true creation out of nothing, darkness is not the same as nothing. Maybe darkness itself has to be created along with light. You've added a nice idea about God as light, God's self. I want to be a little bit careful about that. Just because Genesis 1 says God created the light, not that God was the light. There might be other passages. There are other passages. What's the Psalm 27, that we say all throughout this Elul period? Adonai Ori, God is my light. Of course, that's metaphorically, but also true. So yes, but yes to your comment. Sheldon.
In polytheistic religions, there are many gods, and they live in the heavens. And we're meant to live on the earth, not to strive to go up to where the gods are.
Uh-huh.
So there's something coming up there for...
Okay, that's interesting. And, Judaism is a big religion. Torah is a big text. Hashamayim shamayim ladonai v'haaretz natan livnei adam, right? The heavens belong to God. And he gave the earth, God gave the earth to human beings. But, on the other hand, we are meant to ascend. Who will ascend my holy mountain? By the way, the mountain is sometimes seen as a meeting place between heaven and earth. Maybe that's why the Torah was given in Mount Sinai as a sort of juncture between heaven and earth. I do want to point out, it's really interesting, when you read the very beginning of Genesis 1. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, the heavens and the earth. What's the next word? V'haaretz. It turns away from the heavens and focuses on the earth. The plate of heaven is functional. The stars, moon, and sun are basically lamps and a way of keeping track of the calendar. They're not divine beings. But Strauss mentioned something else which is super interesting. What else is not literally, directly called good? Look in the Strauss passage if you didn't catch it. The human being. The human being is not called good. You have to notice this. When God calls everything very good, it's the whole. It's not specifically said about man. God does not look at his creation of man and call human beings good. Now, Strauss, again, this is the sensitivity of Strauss's reading. Well, yeah, of course, you don't have to call human beings good. Why? What? They're made in the image of God. It would be superfluous, wouldn't it, to say that the human being is good? Because he's made in the image of God. And also, what else does, I'll take your comments in a second. What else does the human being receive? A blessing. Are the heavens blessed by God? God forbid, in the way that Strauss says this. No, of course not. They're not in the image of God. They're not even good. They're not blessed. They're necessary. They're functional. Now, I think some of you were sent, yes, go ahead.
We're made in God's image, but we
Yes.
are not God. We are fallible, and so we have to work at being good.
We're not good just the way we are. And I believe the idea that maybe the human being isn't to be seen as fully good is embedded esoterically, kind of secretly, in this phrase that he uses, however this may be. In other words, I've just given you reasons why the human being was not called good. He was created in the image of God. He or they were created in the image of God because the human being is blessed. However this may be. In other words, there's probably more to say about it. Maybe the human being, and I think we can get this, I think we can understand this, cannot uncritically, unqualifiedly be called good. We're too ambiguous. We're too multifaceted. We're too much having the freedom of choice. You quoted Isaiah 45:7. God created the light, formed the light, and created darkness. He made peace and created evil. That's what the prayer says.
Evil.
But the text of Isaiah says Ra. God created bad or evil. As my teacher, Rabbi Adler, said many years ago, but that was too tough to say in prayers every single day. So we kind of euphemized it. We cleaned it up, and we said God creates everything. But we know behind the scenes from the verse itself that that includes bad. So if God brought that into existence, maybe part of our being in the image of God is, and we know this, we have the power to do bad. You could argue that the rest of nature can't do bad, even when it's red in tooth and claw, as the poet says. It's just being itself. It's doing what it was designed to do. But humans have the ability to choose between good and bad. Okay, yes?
So basically...
One second. Hold on, microphone.
So basically going back to the original condition when it says it's good, it's basically answering God's expectation. And this is a finished product.
Yeah.
And if man would be, a human being would be finished, then we have nothing to do, and we are done.
Bringing Rashi back into
right.
the picture. Rashi doesn't say that himself,
That's right.
but it's very nice, and it goes along with what a couple other people said. Maybe we can't be called good because that would mean we're a finished product. But we're not finished. We're always in development. And what is Yom Kippur? if not a recognition of the fact that we're always in progress, always in process, always in development. This is so important about Judaism. I spend a lot of time when I'm not doing Jewish studies. I have devoted a fair amount of time to studying about early Christianity, and not in all Christianity. You know, it's a very big religion with a lot of diverse views, but in some corners of Christianity, you have more of an idea that you're either saved or damned.
Yeah.
You're in one of two conditions, more or less.
Yeah.
And that is very that is very different than the Jewish conception that a human being is always in progress, always in growth. There's no final stage. There's always more levels of holiness. You can go forward and back. Yes, amen. Thanks to God.
If we're the image of God and we're developing, does that mean that God is also developing? I mean,
Okay, it's a great question. There are two ways to answer that. I mean, there is something called process theology. If any of you have ever heard of process theology, it's a Jewish thing. It's a Christian thing originally, but some Jews have joined in that chorus. Some people might argue that there is such a thing as progression in God. It wasn't this year where I did this thing on politics for Shavuot, but 2 years ago, I talked about how Genesis portrays God as learning. Learning. God learning, right? That was one of the examples. That God realized, oh, this is not exactly the way to handle it because the being that I've created is such and such a way, so I need to have a covenant and I need to handle things differently. It is not the most traditional way of looking at God, but there are some Jewish sources. Since we're doing Yom Kippur also, I'll just share the Hasidic idea. It's not called Yom Kippur in our prayers. It's not Yom Kippur. It's Yom HaKippurim in the plural, the Day of Atonements. And there is a Hasidic idea that just as we ask God for forgiveness, is there a sense in which God needs our forgiveness too? It's a pretty radical idea, but there is a midrash, not just in Chassidut, there is a midrash that says what the passage which gives the description for the korban, the sin offering that we brought on the new moons, calls it chatat lashem. Now, of course, that simply probably just means a sacrifice, a sin offering for Hashem. But the word for is ambiguous. Is it devoted to Hashem or is it on Hashem's behalf? And there is a midrash. I think we should read it on Rosh Chodesh, is my personal liturgical suggestion, because God, it's a whole thing now, but God reduced the moon, right? We're doing Genesis 1. God created the great lights, the two great lights. And then it says the greater light for the day and the lesser light. What do you mean? What do you mean greater and lesser? You said there were two great lights. So the Midrash fills in that originally the sun and the moon were the same size. And the moon, personified, came to God and said, God, this sky isn't big enough for the both of us. You can't have two kings in one realm. And God said, you know, you're right. So I'm going to make you smaller. But don't worry, you have all kinds of advantages too. Like God says, the Jews, Israel, will calculate the months and the holidays based on you. But the moon was not satisfied, even after all these comforts that God said, trying to make the moon feel better. The moon wasn't comforted. So God realized that a kind of an injustice had been done to the moon. So God said to the moon, every Rosh Chodesh, every new moon, bring a sacrifice for me, because I reduced the size of the moon. I take that symbolically. God, in order to have a human universe, in order to have this kind of a finite world, which isn't a perfect world, which isn't heaven, there will be injustices. There will be things that are not right. God asks us to bring a sacrifice on God's behalf because God made the choice to have a creation. The alternative was not to have any creation at all. But this creation brings with it reduction, limitation. And God acknowledges in that midrash in a very powerful way that it's a two-way street. There's a forgiveness that goes in both directions. And maybe that's part of the meaning of Yom HaKippurim, being forgiven and granting forgiveness as well. We're running short on time. Okay, we have a little bit more to do. Sheldon, go ahead.
Immediately after Adam and Eve were created, they have two boys.
Should I go to,
After
Richard, should I go to 7?
Immediately after Adam and Eve were created,
Yeah, go, I'm sorry. Go.
Adam and Eve created, then they have two boys, and Cain kills Abel. So why man is not good? Because man can kill man. And then what we have next? We have the flood, and only Noah is good.
God introduced the potential for sin, for wrongdoing, for corruption, for evil. There's even a bold midrash that it's very bold, it's almost scandalous, that what was God doing when Cain and Abel were fighting and Cain was about to kill Abel? And God is compared there to a Roman emperor watching gladiatorial games. Very harsh by one of the great rabbis of the rabbinic tradition. Again, an acknowledgement. Now, there's a lot of other sources. In the traditional Ela Ezkara, that's read today, the Martyrology, God is also challenged. And, right, God is asked, why are you letting Rabbi Akiva suffer? And there's midrashim about this. And God says, this is my decree, it can't be challenged. But there are a lot of rabbinic sources and Hasidic sources and Jewish texts which do challenge God because it's a covenantal relationship. It's a two-way street. Those feelings of challenging and protest and crying out for justice are legitimate in Judaism. Let's try to move toward the end here. Psalm 19. Can you wait just a minute? Psalm 19. And I'm not going to read through this whole thing, but maybe look at it right now yourself, this psalm. We read this every Shabbat. It was part of Sukkot de Zimmer this morning. It's one of our most beautiful psalms, in my humble opinion. And I feel it really echoes in a powerful way what Strauss was saying about revising our view of the heavens. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky's expanse tells of his handiwork. And it goes on to talk about how you can infer and learn about God from the heavens. So we've taken a step. The heavens are given a better evaluation here, but only because they can inform us and teach us about God's power. I had a student this week, and I was asking them about their religious views, and one of my students said something about having a sense of the divine when looking up at the heavens, at the beautiful night sky. Has anyone ever had that experience? The heavens declare God's glory, but not in words. But not in words. They're silent. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they give forth knowledge. But then it seems to contradict itself. There is no speech. And no words. That's why I put in brackets, no literal speech. no actual words. We don't hear their voice. But it's so powerful. We need the sun to live. And it's beautiful. It comes out of the east like a groom coming forth from his chuppah, his wedding chamber, to run its course like a powerful athlete. Nothing is hidden from its heat. You told me that you did some study of this. A few years ago, you told me you did some careful study of this psalm in a program, Joel.
The psalm that I used for second day Rosh Hashanah in my contemplative circle, we studied this psalm.
Beautiful. And then what does it go on to say? And this is the insight that I wanted to bring to you. Without transition, it goes on to say, the teaching of the Lord is complete, restoring the soul. The testimony of the Lord is trustworthy, educating the simple. The laws of the Lord are upright, rejoicing the heart, etc. What is the true heavens? What is the true speech of God? The true voice? The words that we do hear? The Torah. So this is making, I think, the same move that Strauss was saying. It's not the heavens, even though they're good. God created them. They have a place. They do speak to God's glory. But the true replacement for worship of the heavens is knowledge of God through the Torah. That's what this psalm is suggesting, I believe, pretty clearly. The sun, nothing can escape its heat. We need it. But you know what really provides restoration to the soul? Education for all of us. Justice, joy, enlightenment, reverence, etc., etc. The Torah. The Torah, God's teachings. Torah Adonai Temimah. All right, we're going to wrap up with one more idea. And that is going to the end of Genesis 1. We talked about it already. God looks over everything that was created. V'hinei tov ma'od. And behold, or I translate it as indeed, because we never say behold anymore. And indeed, it was very good. What's changed? Yes. And what produced the change? Who has an idea about why now, at the end of day 6, when God looks over everything, why isn't it just good again? Why is it very good? Yes. It all works well. I'll repeat it. It all works well together. Anybody else have a suggestion?
Complete, it's complete.
Now it's complete. We've elaborated on the theme of completeness. Ellen?
Well, woman was created, and we've not mentioned that, and it's the other connector.
Okay, I tried to stress human beings, when it's not just man, as I was saying. Both male and female, very important, are created on day 1. Also a division, true. The specificity of that whole Adam and Eve thing and the side or the rib, whatever, isn't until day 2. Yes?
I think the distinction of very good is that everything is coming back together in unity, and it's very good.
Okay, so a restoration of unity. Everything has its place. Some of the traditional commentators do say this theme, like everything is good on its own, but when it all comes together, it completes and supplements everything else, so it reaches a state of very good. But we're going to take another midrashic view, which kind of harkens back to a couple things that have been said already. And there are actually there may be more than 2 versions of this midrash, but I gave you 2 of them, and it's one of my favorite midrashim. And it's so Jewish, in my opinion, about what is the significance of the very good and what is being created at the end of the 6 days. So I'll just read part of this in the interest of time. Rabbi Nachman, son of Samuel, son of Nachman, said in the name of Rabbi Samuel, son of Nachman. In other words, he was quoting his father, I guess. When the Torah says, indeed, it was very good, this refers to the drive for good. But when it says, and indeed it was very good, this refers to the drive for bad. Do you see the difference you're seeing in the text? This is so classically rabbinic. The Torah is complete, we just read according to Psalm 19. And that means, among other things, that every word, letter, vowel sound has meaning in it. The Torah could have said, God saw everything that God made. Behold, it was very good. But the word and was added. Even if you don't accept that grammatically, they're making a point that it wasn't only the good drive, it was also the drive for bad. Do you know about the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer Hara? Most of you look like you do. We have two fundamental drives according to the rabbis, rabbinic psychology. The drive to do good things and the drive to do bad things. Yes, Michael, this text is going to affirm that, and there's others that are even stronger. You're right. The rabbis are saying here that it's not just the goodness of human beings that is good, and this contradicts what we were saying before in a way. The badness of human beings, or let's say the potential for badness, the drive for bad, or the drive, the Yetzer Hara, that leads to bad, is also very good. But of course, the Midrash is puzzled by that. Is the drive for bad very good? Yes. Since if it were not for the drive for bad, a person, would not build a home, get married, have children, or earn a living. And they bring a proof text from the book of Ecclesiastes, which is traditionally assigned to King Solomon. Then I saw that all toil and all skill and work come from one person's envy of another. A little vote here for a moderate, reasonable capitalism. What is Yetzer Hara, the drive for bad, according to this text? We've given some examples, so we have to work back inductively. What is Yetzer Hara, the drive for bad? If without it, you wouldn't build a home, you wouldn't get married, you wouldn't have children, you wouldn't earn a living.
So I think it's ego.
Ego?
If I may, I'm thinking about like in creating a
I'll summarize it after.
man in the image of God. Think of an artist who's creating something from nothing, and it's going in from the first day. Think, this was good. This was not complete. This is good. And this is very good. And at the end, very good could be ego. This is very good.
Okay, so you're saying something that's complex, I think. First of all, just focus on the idea of ego. His suggestion was that it's the Yetzer Hara is ego.
It's not a problem.
It's not a problem. In other words, often what people mean by ego is a concern for yourself, a focus on yourself. And this, if that is true, and I think it's something like that, some people also call it ambition, drive for self-acquisition. What did you call it?
Ununitedness.
Okay. Yes? Libido has been suggested, not only in the sexual sense, and Freud too did not only mean libido in the sexual sense, but the energy which allows and drives a person to produce, to gain. These are all things. Like if you were totally a saint, I guess with no self-concern, you wouldn't build a house because you would be spending all your time building other people's houses at Habitat for Humanity.
Yay, we love it.
You wouldn't have children because you wouldn't have time for that. You would be doing other things to contribute to the world. But the rabbis are insisting that the self-concern, the self-interest is not a sinful thing. It's not an evil thing. It can lead to evil. The rabbis acknowledge that. It is still called Yetzer Hara. But as part of the program, it's actually very good. And the last source on this sheet, to finish, is the same basic idea, but the way it derives it from the verse is so fascinating. Because what it says is the Yetzer Hatov, the good drive, is referred to if God would have just said, it is good. Where is a reference to the Yetzer Hara, the bad drive, found? In the word very. The Yetzer Hara puts the very good into puts the very into very good. That is the piece which turns up the goodness of people, of humanity, to the level of very good, because, I would argue, it gives us that potential that many of you were referring to before, of the human being is in the image of God, someone who chooses, someone who can produce good, someone who can bring excellence into the world through these forces that aren't just limited to doing what you're designed to do. We have choice. We have the power to choose. And every aspect of creation, I'm finishing with this thought, this midrash is a powerful affirmation of the overall statement in Genesis 1 that the universe is good, because even the things that look bad have a place contributing to the overall very goodness of creation. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to stop here. Gemar Chatima Tova to everyone. Thank you.
So, why don't you guys take a 5-minute stretch, and you are welcome to come back or not come back, whatever your choice.
My pleasure. Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. Yes. Could they have come up with something else? You're welcome. Okay. Okay. How does functionality distinguish itself from other descriptors? Good. So if you're focusing on function, sure. It's interesting in terms of your thesis, because the very next thing is not to do anything, rest. Yeah. Even but before you start. Thank you. I love surfing. Yes, I've used that. I have used that. Absolutely. Yeah, so many people now don't know Star Trek anymore, especially for the series. Years ago, when I was going to do Israel, I gave a Shavuot class about Yitzhak Rock using Star Trek. Yeah, oh, it's totally different. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Good to see you. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Good tea. And that goes with what you're quote from Ecclesiastes. Envy. Yeah, it doesn't. Yes. Yeah. By the way, I'll mention to you, I didn't mention it here, it's a cute little thing. The word this is very easy. Them Aleph Dalet, rearrange the letters. It's a Dalet. Yeah, yeah, rise up in the dress, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's in there. Yeah. Well, we see it especially, at least the way most people understand the Tower of Babel stuff.
All right, so we're going to get started. I'm literally have a copy of. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I have one more copy. Okay, there should be enough. I know that Seth was handing them out, so there were, I don't know, 50, 60 copies, so they should be around, but I'll read everything in case you don't have it. Oh, I need a microphone. Thank you, Red. Okay. When you think of holiday celebrations, right, you think Sukkot, you think Pesach, you think Shavuot, you think Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. If you had to associate one of those holidays with simcha and joy, which one would jump to the top of your mind? Simchat Torah. Well, of course, because it's in the name, right? And what do we do on Simchat Torah? We run around and we dance and we sing and we have ice cream and all sorts of fun things. Okay, what else besides Simchat Torah? Sukkot. Why Sukkot? What's the name of the holiday of Sukkot? Yes, Zman Simchatenu. It's the day of our joy. It's written into the very name of the holiday. And how do we celebrate Sukkot? I mean, what a great holiday. What brilliance by the rabbis to recognize after the intensity of the work that we have to engage in on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur that we absolutely need something to let go. And what better way, as Gary was saying earlier, to sit under the stars outside looking up and feeling the joy of the intensity of the holidays with family and friends and wonderful meals and lots of celebrations. Man Simchatenu. Well, surprisingly, if you look at the Mishnah, if you have a copy, and if not, I'm going to read it. The Mishnah in Ta'anit, and the Mishnah in Ta'anit deals with specifically, what is a Ta'anit? It's a fast. I'm sorry, I know I made more than enough copies for all of us, but I don't know what happened to them, so look around. But I'll read it. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, "There were no days as joyous for the Jewish people as the 15th of Av and as Yom Kippur. As on them the daughters of Jerusalem would go out in white clothes, which each woman borrowed from another." Why were they borrowed? They did this so as to not embarrass one who did not have her own white garments. All the garments that the women borrowed required immersion, as they were previously worn by ritual impurity. And the daughters of Jerusalem would go out and dance in the vineyards. Okay, so according to this Mishnah, what times of the year are the most joyous times of year for the Jewish people? The 15th of Av, Tu B'Av. What is Tu B'Av? Yes, it's Jewish Valentine's Day, right? Lover's Day. Jewish Valentine's Day, which we could understand why that would be a day of joy. Why? Well, it is after Tisha B'Av, but what really is going on with Tu B'Av? What's the intention? We're making shidduchs. Exactly. It's a day of joy because it's a statement about our future. It's a statement about the possibility and hope that we have in the future when couples are willing to get together and decide to spend the rest of their lives together. It so pains me when I meet with couples who are getting married. I mean, I'm so glad that they're getting married. That doesn't pain me at all. It doesn't pain me when they're meeting to get married. What pains me is when they say to me, "And we don't want to have children because we don't want to bring children into this world." And it so pains me because where is the hope? Where is the potentiality? Where is the possibility that through your love and raising of those children, that they will create the world that needs to be created? And so on Tu B'Av, right, that, and now, don't get me wrong, there's lots of reasons why people choose not to, and we have to respect all of those reasons. But the idea of Tu B'Av as being one of the joyous times in the Jewish calendar was because of recognizing the potentiality of hope. And what's the other day that is, according to this text, no more joyous day? Doesn't say Sukkot here, does it? Doesn't say Simchat Torah, does it? What does it say? Yom Kippur. And when you are approaching Yom Kippur, are you thinking, I can't wait. It's the joyous, most celebratory day of the year. Yay! It's Yom Kippur. Okay, now I'm done for the day. That's it. Or, let me ask you, how do you feel as Yom Kippur? But I can tell you how I feel as Yom Kippur approaches. Yeah, Steve. Right, which exactly, right? You just answered the conflict of this statement in the Mishnah.
That's when the shidduchs happen, is during the break the fast. The women are all wearing white, and in the Orthodox world, a lot of shidduchs.
Actually, it wasn't even during the break the fast. You know, it was actually during the afternoon. It was right after Yizkor, but there was no Yizkor in those days. It was actually originally in the moment in which the high priest would finish the purification of the temple, and the fast would break in the afternoon. And I know, but like right about now, in fact. And this is according to the Talmud, that the priest would engage with the family and the community, and they would celebrate. But on Yom Kippur afternoon is when, according to the Mishnah, that the women would go out. But I don't think that's even the totality of what this Mishnah is saying, right? It's true that on Tu B'Av and Yom Kippur, the daughters of Jerusalem would go out in white clothes. But there's something even more profound here. What do you think else is going on here? What is it about Yom Kippur that gives this idea that the women and men would go out into the fields to find each other and begin relationships? Behind all that, what's the Mishnah stating that the Mishnah is actually not stating so carefully? What is it about the holiday of Yom Kippur that leads to that conclusion by the young men and women?
We put away all the ego, sorry.
No, go ahead.
We move away from all the ego, we go inward and we get in touch with who we really are, and that connects us even more as, as a family. And then when we are in that state of being, it's just easier for us to feel the joy and the peace.
That's
how I
lovely.
feel. I love
That's
Yom
beautiful.
Kippur.
The work that we do on Yom Kippur, the self-reflection, the tshuva that we go through, the recognition of the limits that we need to have of our ego in relationship to the other, brings us to a point where we are more able to and be more responsive to another, in the sense that we can let go of our own needs and enter into relationship with somebody else where our needs often need to be sublimated to make that relationship successful. That's a beautiful answer. Yes, sir.
I was going to say the same, soul searching really, and soul based.
Very nice. So in the process of searching our own soul, we then learn how to make room for what it is that we need and can find in the soul of another human being and create that bond that we know can be successful. Another wonderful answer. Yeah, Al.
The weight and the actions of a year have now been, we've forgiven ourselves for our deeds. And
So
that weightlessness, has freed us.
there is no question that, hopefully, the mistakes that we make, the sins that we carry with us become burdensome and heavy. And to have to live our life always with those sins in our consciousness, that can weigh us down. To have a day like Yom Kippur that provides the means by which we can be, as Al said, weightless, gives us the moment to be able to celebrate with another. Wonderful, yeah.
I'm stuck on the white clothes. I'm thinking school uniforms, how it is that if all the eligible women are all wearing white, then the essence of each woman becomes more apparent to a potential suitor.
No, it's the opposite. In other words, if everybody's wearing the same thing, then you're not judging based upon the clothing that they're wearing.
That's what I just said.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. It's late in the day. Yes. Yes, Ellen, exactly. Yeah. Yes, correct. Exactly. All of the accoutrements are put away, and all you see is the essence of the human being. Very nice. Yes, sir.
Dude, answers have been terrific from the side of the person searching for someone.
Wait, say the
I
first.
thought the answers were
Oh,
terrific about we sort of cleansed ourselves and now we can go more open and searching for another. But if you think about the fact that we've had a communal experience and the people that are searching for us have also gone through that experience, so that you're going to be able to find someone that's also more has cleansed themselves.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. In other words, it's not just that I do this on my own individually. It's that we are all together collectively going through the state of purification, and therefore, when we are out in the field, we are all at the same place. We have all struggled. We all recognize that we are all fallible. We all recognize that there was work that each one of us needed to do, and that way we can approach another person with much greater sensitivity, much greater appreciation for the fact that I'm not perfect, you're not perfect, and together we're going to make an imperfect human being or an imperfect relationship. That's nice. I can see we're going to get very far in this 2 pages because I think Rabbi Vogel's coming in 1 minute to.
But what if you already have your person and you don't need another lady in white?
Yeah, then you wouldn't go out into you would not go out into the fields and dance. That is true. That is true. So perhaps there is a hidden lesson in this Mishnah that we have to take into consideration. What happens if it's not for the sake of love that we are looking for, but what else is it about Yom Kippur that should bring us the kind of joy that is compared to the joy that one would feel in creating shidduchim, right? Shidduchim. Good question. Yes.
But could it also, sorry, go.
We'll take both of you.
Like a renewal of vows with the person you're with, because it's about letting go and moving on, and maybe that's when you also, like between people, my talk of my things I apologize for was the most intense with my husband.
So I will make suggestions from time to time when people come into my office, couples who are struggling for some aspect of their marriage. And I say to them, on Yom Kippur, before Yom Kippur, I want to offer you an opportunity to think about your relationship in the future differently. Each of you write down one thing that you want and need from your partner. Share that one thing that you want and need from your partner. Write it on a small piece of paper. Roll up that piece of paper and stick it into the mezuzah on your bedroom door. And every time you walk in and out of your bedroom door, you touch that mezuzah. You kiss that mezuzah, and it's a constant reminder to you, day in and day out, what you have committed to your partner and what your partner has committed to you. And I always say you do it, right, during the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, the 10 days of repentance. You put it in there before Yom Kippur, and that becomes the gift you're giving each other over the course of the next year. So you're absolutely right, Monica. It's a great offering that you presented. No, of course you do. Yes, yes. You can't assume that the other person is going to guess what it is that you need. You have to share it and say, yes, this is what I need from you. This is what I need from you. Michelle, and then, well, yeah.
I was just thinking about the rejoicing at the end of Yom Kippur. On a very base level, we survived the judgment. We've got another year.
Okay, so simply the fact that we can carry through the intensity of this day and recognize that God has written us in the book of life is in and of itself, with nothing else, a moment of joy and gratitude. That I wake up tomorrow and I have a whole year in front of me to be able to mess up again. Yes.
Yeah, the other thought about relationship is that you always have the opportunity to renew your relationship with yourself. And with God, right? I mean, that's the cleansing that goes on, and it gives us a chance to continue our work.
Very nice. The fact is that we have to start with self, right? I can't expect to be in a relationship with another if I haven't done the work on myself that I know that I need to work on. Ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, which means what? Love your neighbor as you love yourself. We have to work on ourselves first before we can be able to fully love another. And Yom Kippur does that. Okay, last one, and then we'll move a little bit further into the text. Are you good with 10 more minutes?
Take another hour.
Wait a minute. I think I said the same thing to Gary. Yeah, Brian. That's wonderful. In other words, don't look at this. This becomes a metaphor. The dancing in the streets with the or in the fields with the young men and young women is actually a metaphor for the way that we need to prepare the chuppah, right? The dancing that's going to take place on Simchat Torah when we dance with the Torah, but really what we're doing is we're dancing with God in that moment with the opportunity to reconnect with God's Word and God's Torah for another year. What amazing answers. Just amazing answers. So this is the Mishnah. And I want us to hold on to this teaching because I'm not sure that we go into Yom Kippur holding on to the spirit of joy that all of you so beautifully just articulated. Now, it's going to be another 364 days before you get here again. But I want you to hold on to this idea. Hold on to this notion that with the beginning of Elul next year, think about the process that you're going through from the beginning of Elul until Yom Kippur as the steps that you're taking to increase your joy each and every day until Yom Kippur. When that day for you, for us, becomes the day of the greatest amount of joy. Right? Hold on to that. For the biblical and rabbinic understanding of joy, it didn't always seem like that, but it did in a different way. So I want you to take a look at the biblical Yom Kippur. And let's think about how, in the biblical version of Yom Kippur, how atonement, kapara, was accomplished. Leviticus 16:16. Anybody know when we read this verse? Yes, we read it this morning in the Torah service. In this morning's Torah service, we read about what happened in ancient times on how Leviticus understands what the Day of Atonement was. So it says, Kippur al HaKadesh metumat b'nei Yisrael. He, who's he? The high priest, shall purge the shrine of the impurity and the transgressions of the Israelites, whatever their sins, and he shall do the same for the tent of meeting, which abides with them in the midst of their impurity. So according to this verse in Leviticus, what is the nature of Yom Kippur? What are we supposed to be doing? What are we supposed to be doing? We are supposed to be doing nothing. Right, we can watch. That's true. We can watch. But you know, we don't even bring the animals. Who brings the animals? Aaron, the Levites. Right? We don't have much of anything to do on this celebration of Yom Kippur. It is the high priest who does it for us. And what is it that the high priest is doing? Yes, the high priest is cleaning the schmutz. Cleaning the schmutz off the shrine. You know what schmutz is? Okay, for those of you who don't know what schmutz is, schmutz is filth. Filth. But now the question is, what is the nature of the filth? Where does the filth come from? It doesn't come, no. The blood is actually what cleanses the schmutz, the filth. The filth is our sins. The filth is the sins that get in the way of God's presence being able to abide amongst the people of Israel. And so what happens is over a year of sinning, all those sins get placed physically in some way on the altar, on the tabernacle, and God's presence leaves. Because God's presence can't be where there is impurity. Now imagine what it would feel like for you if you were distanced from God. Imagine what it feels like for you when you have been distanced from God. What creates the separation between you and God? Sin. Yes. right? When we don't live up to the people that we know that we can be, we feel distant. Right? We feel distant from the God which is in the face of the individual that we have committed a sin against, because as Gary taught earlier, where does God reside? Within each of us. Right? That's the story of creation. So it's not only the individual, but it is collectively. Right? When we sin, we distance ourselves from God, and God, according to the ancient Near East, cannot reside. God's presence cannot be there. And so the priest comes in, and through hocus pocus, or what we would call 2 goats, right? Chosen by God, 1 goat that is going to be slaughtered, and the blood is going to be sprinkled on the altar and sprinkled on the shrine. And the other goat, which is the scapegoat, what does the scapegoat mean? Right? That all of the sins get placed on that goat and sent off. The shrine is purified. God comes back. What did the people do to make this happen? Nothing. Nothing at all. In the biblical version of Yom Kippur, which is the conclusion of the celebration that begins with the new year, what the Bible is saying is that we don't have to do anything. All we need to do is be there in the presence of the priest to make sure that the tabernacle is cleansed, and then we know that we are forgiven of our sins, and we can begin to celebrate a new year.
I have a question. So if the scapegoat carries all our sins, why does the priest need to kill the other goat and sprinkle the blood everywhere? Didn't
Because
all
you,
the sins leave?
no. There's the sins that we carry with us, of course, that are going to be placed on the goat, and there's the schmutz, the dirt, right? The filth that has caused the temple to look dirty. I mean, it's not dirty as in dirt, but it's dirty as in impurities that has caused the temple to be lacking God's presence. So one is the cleansing of the temple, and the other is the removal of all of our guilt onto the goat, and the goat is sent away. Al, I'm going to answer your question, and Sandy, but I want you to think about this question. And the question that I want you to think about is, would this work for you today? This kind of purification, the biblical purification, would that be enough? Because, turn the page, where we were going to conclude in 45 minutes, but we're not, in the Sifra, which is a commentary on Leviticus, Sifra Amor, Parsha 11, chapter 14. For I might think that Yom Kippur atones only if one made it a sacred occasion and practiced self-denial and abstained from malacha, work. How do I know that even if one did not do these, the day atones? Scripture states it's the Day of Atonement. In other words, the Sifra is saying that, no, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to fast. You don't have to come to synagogue. You don't have to do, the day itself cleanses. How does that make you feel? What the heck are we doing sitting here for so many hours making ourselves miserable on this day? It's supposed to be a day of joy. And it seems like self-denial takes away the ability for us to feel the joy, unless something else is going on. I have to figure out how to wrap this up in 5 minutes. Yes?
I'll speak quickly. Is it also like how a child becomes a bar bat mitzvah when they turn 16, whether or not they turn
13. According to this first comment of the Sifra, yes. The Day of Atonement itself has power in and of itself. The way in which the high priest functions in there and cleanses and purifies is all we need. But, there is a big but. Biblical scholars actually suggest that towards the end of chapter 16 in the book of Leviticus, specifically verses 29 through 31, is an appendix that's added later to the story. And what does the appendix that's added later to the story say? And this shall be for you a law for all time. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, you shall practice self-denial. You shall do no manner of work, neither the citizen nor the alien who resides among you. For on this day atonement shall be for you to purify you of all your sins. You shall be pure before the Lord. It shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for you, and you shall practice self-denial. It is a law for all time. So it seems, according to this part of chapter 16 versus the other part of 16, there is work that we need to do. And what's the work that we need to do? Self-denial. And what is typically self-denial? Fasting. Now, it's not only fasting, right? No sex, no work, although that's not really self-denial, no work. that's joy in and of it. Wait a minute, we're working right now. Something doesn't seem kosher there. You're not supposed to bathe, you're not supposed to anoint yourself, you're not supposed to wear leather shoes. Isn't it amazing that I can come to shul in a suit and wear Sperry tennis shoes? How fun, right? Thank you. Thank you. All of those things are the practice of self-denial. So it's more than just the priest doing what the priest is doing. According to the end of this chapter, it requires something for us to do. In fact, if you turn to the bottom of the Sifra, look at number 4. Well, actually, you have to read, let's read quickly. Number 2, for I might think that Yom Kippur atones only with the offerings and the goats. How do I know that day atones even without them? Scripture states it's the Day of Atonement. So the priest didn't even have to do the 2 goats. The day itself was inherently holy and effective. I might think, number 3, that it atones both for those who repent and those who do not. Logic dictates a sin offering and a guilt offering atone, and Yom Kippur atones. Just as they atone only for those who are penitent, so Yom Kippur should atone only for penitence. But no, this may be so for a guilt offering and a sin offering which do not atone for intentional sin as they would for an unintentional sin. Would you say the same for Yom Kippur, which atones for intentional and unintentional sin? Since it does, I'm on number 5, we should say that it atones for both those who do repent and for those who do not. Scripture therefore states, indeed, a term of exclusion. This teaches that it atones only for those who repent. So, the Midrash itself is going through stages and saying that what seems like the day itself is all you need to do, the fact remains, no. You have to do the work. We have to do the work. For the day to be a day of true joy, for the day to be a day of real celebration, for the day to be a day that all those beautiful answers that you gave earlier about why the men and the women would go into the field to dance, it requires our work. It requires self-denial. It requires the time that we spend in synagogue. But now I want to go back as we conclude with the statement that I asked you before. If that's the case, then how do you make sure that when you celebrate Yom Kippur, you approach it with a different attitude? How do you make sure that when Yom Kippur comes around, you approach it as this is one of the greatest moments of joy that I have in my life, to be able to come together as a community, collectively, and repent. And for that, I am forever grateful. How do you do that? And we'll end here. Yeah, Jeanette. Nice. Think about the end game and not what it takes to get there, the hard work. What else? Yeah. What? we can bring 2 goats. There was a colleague of ours who was at Adat Shalom many, many years ago, and he actually did, on Yom Kippur, bring goats to the Bima for Yom Kippur. I don't think he slaughtered.
It brought more people in.
It did bring more people. He didn't slaughter them, but that was his, Sandy.
Approach people with sincere apology for wrongdoings, mistakes, known or unknown, unintentional. Chance to ask people for forgiveness.
Beautiful. Like Rabbi Vogel's sermon yesterday in the evening. right, Gail, who forgave her mother, not because her mother deserved that forgiveness, but because for Gail, it meant that she could walk in the world with joy. She could walk in the world with joy. What is the point of holding a grudge? What is the point of bearing that anger? What is the point of seeking revenge? If this is supposed to be the day of the greatest joy, can we let go of those hurts that people have caused us in our life and openly forgive and say, this is the greatest day because this day gives me that opportunity to do that? Whatever it may be for you, right? See if you can, in the coming year, approach Yom Kippur the way our tradition invites us to approach Yom Kippur, a day filled with opportunity, with optimism, with hope in the future, as expressed in young men and women going out into the street to find matches, and feel that kind of joy next year here at Hamakom. Gemar Chatima Tova.
Oh, it's so great. By the way, if you want to leave after that great teaching, feel free. I mean, that was, you don't have to stay here. You can come in, you can go out. By the way, the Mishnah, when it says the five, V'enitim et nafshechem teichem, and one of them is shoes. Does it say leather shoes or just shoes? It's shoes. Shoes, I'll tell you why. I just studied this recently, is that the original part was you weren't allowed to wear any shoes. And really, now if you want to talk about being painful, like that would be painful. Now, we get out of it by, like, is this really in the spirit of afflicting yourself? I mean, I want to ask you, right? Like, it's Skechers that, like, I don't know about yours, mine are very comfortable. It seems to be contrary. I should be walking on glass, right? Like, that's what they're talking about, and it's only later that they decide and they allow, when it says shoes, they create this caveat that says that you're not allowed to wear leather shoes because in that time, in rabbinic times, they were the most comfortable shoes. Okay? And wood shoes and other things, those were the uncomfortable, like the people who couldn't afford really good stuff, that's what they had. And so that's where it all comes from. You make me think also hocus pocus. Do you know where abracadabra comes from, perhaps? Anybody know this? Aramaic. From Aramaic, maybe? Yeah. Avara kedabra, right? It shall be created as it is said. Right? Isn't that something? Like, you never know the impact. Anyway, this is supposed to be Ask the Rabbi, not Stump the Rabbi. But I always say if I don't know the answer, I'll make one up, or I'll defer to Rabbi Camrus. But it's an idea, an opportunity, just things that you've ever wondered about. To be able to ask and to think about. Yes?
I've been thinking about this for a while. So, in Psalm 150 and in the Psalm for Shabbat, they're talking about playing instruments that need to be tuned.
Okay.
Why is it that the Orthodox and certain aspects of our congregation refuse to have instrumental music as part of the joy of celebrating Shabbat and other pagim?
Yeah, there was. So does everybody understand? In temple times, the instruments were very much a part of temple ritual. There are those who say you can't do it outside of the temple, right? So one way to notice is that they'll say that the exceptions were allowed, and the Levites doing everything in the temple was the exception because the temple was the exception. In fact, you could offer up you could have fire burning on Shabbat in the temple, but you couldn't in other places in terms of sacrifice. That was a unique place. So the temple had a uniqueness. And there is a sense that there was much of Jewish tradition that deferred and dismissed any type of musical accompaniment, any type in prayer, and that became the normative the normative form of prayer. And so the question is whether to recapture, to rethink what is the meaning of it. Look, the same way we redefine women's role in Judaism as well. Let's rethink what it meant and how we interact with it, and how do we reinterpret it, and that's where the music comes in. Some synagogues, by the way, that even consider themselves modern Orthodox, might use drums and other things which don't have strings to it. So there's lots of level of this. One of them is, by the way, if you grew up in a conservative synagogue in the 50s, did you have an organ usually? That was a big thing, organs. Now, by the way, organs you don't have to tune, even though they are electric, which meant there was another issue. I will tell you one of the great, I think it's kind of maybe an embarrassment, but, and we've talked about this, that the conservative movement, many synagogues, the majority of synagogues have guitars and other things on Shabbat, and yet we still don't have a tshuva, a rabbinic responsa that approves them. Right? We have a law committee and they just, for some reason, were never able to even approve it, even officially for the movement. So that's where we come from. Yes?
Okay, a bird, okay, fish is parv.
Fish is parv.
Okay, a bird has to get a fly in the walk.
Okay, bird has to fly into walk. You're getting complicated. The rabbis had a very hard time classifying birds. I just want to say that. They had a really hard time classifying birds and what was kosher and what wasn't. So we just get into gray areas. I just want to, we're building on weaker cases. So go ahead.
I'm just trying to figure out why a bird is not parv.
Why is a bird not parv? Yeah, certainly you can't cook a bird in its mother's milk. They don't lactate. And so there are some people that would suggest that chicken should be parv, but there's no rabbinic way. Those of you are like, I always try and find, is there a permissive way to think about how to do it in law? And this one, there really isn't. The rabbis just established that it looks so much like meat, it tastes so much like meat, that if it walks like a chicken, looks like a duck, quack like a duck, it's meat. They went with meat. It doesn't hold it doesn't hold all the reasoning. Yes.
So obviously, when the ark is opened aside, how was it determined when we stand and when we sit during certain prayers?
It was. We talk about this all the time. Look around the camera's in face.
Or is it just if your feet are tired and you say everything
You can see in the book, like this moxer is actually a really good moxer. It'll actually tell you where to rise, where to stand, where to sit. The high holiday, it's interesting. Many synagogues just did it as a way of honoring people. For example, I know there are many conservative synagogues, maybe you grew up with opening the Ark at Aleinu. Did any of you grow with opening up? Did you at Sinai Temple? I bet you did. I bet you did, no? You don't remember.
But when I first came to Shomer Torah,
They opened the ark when you came here. They opened the ark for Aleinu. And there's no, right? Now, by the way, the only precedence would be for the Grand Aleinu, but there's no precedence at all. And yet there are places that just did these things to open up, to stand, and to create sanctity. It's the same thing about standing for Shema and sitting sometimes. How do you acknowledge the sanctity of it? The high holidays is unique. And by the way, when we open the ark at the beginning of the Amidah, for example, to Misod through that paragraph, we do it on all holidays that are seen as days, if you will, of petitions to God. So when we want to petition God in particular, that's when we open the ark. That God, yeah, okay, you can hear us now. So in that way, there's many times. But there's sometimes we'll look at each other and we'll go like, there's no reason to stand at this point.
Well, and the same token, the whole idea of standing and sitting for various prayers, it really depends on the community that you are part of, because there are so many traditions. Like if you're in Israel and you're in a Sephardic shul, you will never stand for the Kaddish except for Kaddish Yatom, because it's not traditional to stand for Kaddish. In an Ashkenazic synagogue, there are those who stand for every single Kaddish, regardless of where it is in the service. There's also a tradition that says if you're sitting and the Kaddish comes up, you stay sitting. If you're already standing, then you remain standing. Which of those traditions is right? All of the traditions are right, because as many Jews as there are that many traditions in our way of doing things.
And you'll see, by the way, it's a little thing I do with the Kaddish, that if we're going right to a Kaddish, I want people to sit. I will actually say a couple words before going into the Kaddish. You wouldn't have noticed it, but that's my way of being able to make that distinction. Also, Russ, when there's certain, like Friday night, the Shamru, when you recite verses from the Bible very often, sometimes you'll stand. So there's a number of different rules that come into that, but frankly, sometimes we're just standing because we want another ark opening. Yes, go ahead, Russ.
This is actually Kaddish related, an observation.
Kaddish related.
Yes, in an Indian movie, they speak mostly Hindi, but they'll switch to English, and there's some significance to that. So in Kaddish, it kind of hopscotches back and forth between Aramaic and Hebrew. Is there any meaning to be read into that, just like in an Indian movie?
Okay, so if you know anything about the mourner's Kaddish, it is Aramaic. The Kaddish in general, and how can you tell it's Aramaic?
Because I don't understand.
It's the people, because Israelis don't understand it. No, it's true. No, because the predominant concluding closing letter is an aleph rather than a hey in Aramaic. So that's how you can look at it and to know. You have it in halach ma'anya, right, which is also Aramaic, in the Passover Seder. And the rule was that when they wanted you to understand, when they wanted the people to understand something, they did it in Aramaic. That tells you actually how important a prayer was for the rabbis wanting them to understand it. The people did not speak Hebrew at that time. They didn't understand it.
Unlike today.
Right, we tend to think in for example, in the first century, with all these great rabbis, that everybody knew Hebrew. No. Right? The scholars knew. They studied Mishnah, but they didn't know Hebrew either. So when they wanted them, they would put the Aramaic in. And so occasionally, I don't know, because I think it's a biblical verse that comes in with the Hebrew. But most of it is Aramaic. I think all of it's Aramaic. Which one? Say shalom at the end. Oh, say because it's an addition as well. There's where Aramaic and the similarities to Hebrew. It's funny, by the way. The hit pa'el form is actually different in Aramaic, and there's a different pronunciation. But sometimes it will feel like Hebrew when it really is Aramaic. Oseh Shalom was added later. How did this all start? Probably at the Middle Ages, when they would do a teaching. It started Kaddish for rabbis, and it was their final teaching. That's how that's how I learned it as well. And eventually, in that egalitarian spirit, it became for everybody. But it was the final teaching that you would do in sort of memory of your teacher, and then caught on. But that's really only from about the Middle Ages or so. Right? So that's why it's Aramaic. Sina in the back.
Speaking about Kaddish, why is the Ashkenazi version and the Sephardic version completely different? Not completely different, but there's much more in the Sephardic than it is in Ashkenazi.
The later, by understanding, the later it develops, the greater chance you are that going to have changes like that as well, because they're in their separate communities, and they're creating their earliest prayers are going to be passed on, and from both communities are going to be much more similar. But later ones are going to be different. You have different blessings. You have an introductory blessing coming up to the Torah before you start Baruch Adonai Barach. There's an introductory verse. Adonai Machem. So there are different versions according to just again locality. It shows the differences. The minhama koma, we say, the custom of the place. Yes, Eileen.
But by the way, that's important because sometimes we get so fixed on we have to do it right.
Yeah.
What is right? Right? Right is dependent upon the traditions and the customs that you grew up with. What's right for me may not be right for somebody else. And therefore, the term we have to do it right really should be excised in many ways, especially when it comes to tefillah, because there are so many versions of tefillah, so many different sidurim across the ages that offer very different ways of even the things that we know so well in the Amidah that have different versions of the actual language of the prayer. And therefore, we should be a little bit more sensitive to, well, wait a minute, you're doing it wrong. No, you're doing it the way that you learned it. And the way you learned it, there may be some truth to that.
It's so interesting. By the way, forget about melodies as well. Like, what's the correct melody for a prayer? Exactly, right? It's the prayer I grew up with. That's the answer. The answer is the prayer I grew up with, because that's the prayer that's so meaningful to you. Let's go on. Yes.
Back to chicken parmesan.
Back to chicken parmesan.
My family knows that I've been kind of slipping into like the chicken and the
Which came first, chicken and the egg? Is that?
No, the chicken and the cheese.
Okay.
And for all my life, I've never done any cheese. And then now today, Yom Kippur, kind of sins and all that, thinking about that. And I really like it. How big of a sin is it?
We need some cleansing.
Rabbi, you know there is no sin.
It's the mother's milk.
It depends on your childhood.
My sin meter out. How do you? Peter, you have an answer?
There is no sin. It depends on your childhood, right?
Depends on your childhood. The whole notion of laws and how they're passed down and how they evolve is so complicated. And the rabbis understood that the laws of kashrut, that they were, by the way, they say the laws of Shabbat hang by a thread. In terms of how the rabbis created, the prohibitions of Shabbat. I'll get back to you. Don't worry, I'm not avoiding you. But the prohibitions of Shabbat come from the consecutive verses of you shall observe Shabbat and related to the temple. And so then they take the 39 labors of the temple, the tabernacle, and they connect it to defining the 39 what we call melachot, basic labors. And then from there, other things. And so it just evolves. It's interesting. I'll give you one in which I've changed my own personal praxis, and that's the Sephardic observance of Passover. And so in the Ashkenazic tradition, you're not allowed to have corn, legumes, rice. And why? I was taught actually a wrong reason. I think I understand a little differently. I don't know the reasons you have, Rabbi Cameron. I was told that you can make breads out of those things, and you can. Right? Legumes, anything that's hard, peas, other things, you can make breads out of them. But apparently it comes from the marketplace, and in which, think about when you go to an Israeli market and have all those big burlap sacks out there, and they have together real prohibited grains, wheat, rice, spelt, barley, and oats, those 5, with those other types of semi-grains, if you will, and what happens is they spill one into the other. And so here's what happened. Oh, you want a crazy one? Let me get back to you maybe. Is why can you buy milk before Passover but not during Passover? Did you know that? You can buy it before Passover, and it's considered kosher for Passover, and cheese, but not, right? You have to, if you buy during Passover, it has to be kosher for Passover. Now, why is that? Now, it comes to a rule called 1/60th, batel b'shishim. 1/60th is, by the way, it's used in a number of areas. Sleep is seen as 1/60th of death. When you visit somebody in the hospital or at home who is ill, you take away 1/60th of their illness with you. Right? So 1/60th is like, it's a little bit, but it's not too much. It's enough, but, so 1/60th was defined as the point in which you might taste something. So here's the rule. Let's talk about beef, Bargajan. What is it when you have milk and beef? What is that dish? Beef stroganoff, right? So if you're cooking a beef pot and milk accidentally spills in, right? You're supposed to take it up. If it lands on a piece of meat, you take out the meat, right? Whatever you can take out. But you can actually, if it's less than 1/60th of the volume, you just stir it and it becomes kosher again. Right? But you can't do this. You can't be like cooking going, whoops. Whoops. This is where kavanah, intention, counts for a lot. Right? Because really it's about de facto, and the rabbis are brilliant. Like de facto, they want to be as lenient and understanding as possible, because you don't want to have to throw out the whole thing. And so in that way, the 1/60th, so before Passover, if there happened to be anything, it's batel b'shishim, it is considered, nullified, but afterwards, that rule doesn't apply after Passover starts. And you can't have anything, you can't have 1 in a million of it. So it gets a little bit crazy. So Sephardic, I'm willing to change because I understand where that prohibition came from. I think by the way, when the tshuva in Israel was written many years ago. The conservative movement, Masorti, wrote a tshuva responsa about the Sephardic ways for Passover and called the Ashkenazi tradition minhag shtut, as I recall. Right? If you know, shtut is nonsense, and said it came out of nowhere. So something like that. Look, I'm being honest with all of you in terms of how I work with halakha. I'm willing to say, like, I think I'm willing to change personally. With chicken, I just can't see redefining it. It is so well connected with us thinking meat. On Friday night, you eat chicken. Although, by the way, before there was a custom to eat chicken, what was the custom to eat on Friday night in Talmudic times? Fish. Right? You couldn't catch a chicken in the Kinneret. And so they would, like, fish is what was the major food. So I can't I can't tell you how sinful. I can tell you only that for me, I can't validate, being able to do that. Yeah, Monica.
Okay, I'm gonna stand because I'm short. I'm fascinated by mumble davening. When you're up there.
Mumble davening, your fan, yes.
It's fascinating to me that sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes you're leading more, and sometimes everyone's on their own and they're all mumbling. That's the first part of my question: is where does that come from?
Okay.
And the second part is, have either of you ever in your lives, when you're mumble davening, just say gibberish under your breath? Just for a second.
I recite lines from my favorite movie.
Davening, so the word davening, Yiddish, right, in terms of praying, if you will, is an essential part of being able to finish your Jewish prayers on time. Would many of you say that we go through the prayers too quickly? I'm not actually just the service too long, right? But very often, for many people, we go through at a pretty crisp rate. Because, by the way, because services would take 30, 40, 50% longer if we really davened everything aloud and articulated so clearly. So part of it has, and so we try and we talk a lot. We have a short, we have our own codes about, we're gonna do this piece. We're going to daven or we'll mumble daven. That's what we talk. I talk in terms of how we're going to get through the pieces and make sure that people feel they've been able to do their prayer, and that we feel good that we've offered enough opportunity to. And it's going to be different for everybody. So try imagining weighing the needs of everybody. By the way, the end of the Amidah is always that moment. When are you going to start doing Oseh Shalom or something? How many people can you still have standing, or should everybody be finished? You should know everything we do in terms of prayer leaders, not just rabbis, cantors, there's a great intentionality. It's thinking about the kavanah and the flow and how prayers work and what are we going to do and how do we, acknowledge and yet see there's distinctions. So probably one of the hardest things that we do.
Yeah, I would just answer to Rabbi Vogel's excellent response and say that originally the prayer service was much more compact than it is today. In other words, many more prayers have been added. And when you have a siddur where the prayer is actually fixed, and over the generations more and more is added, people feel like, oh my God, now we have to do all of this. But a good portion of the prayer service is really just supposed to be a preparation for the two main prayers, which are Shema and the Amidah. Everything else is preparatory. And a lot of Sukkot Zimra was seen originally as just an opportunity to meditate and prepare our soul for the Ol Malchut Shemayim, the recitation of the Shema, where we accept God as our, right, that we're bound to the mitzvot, and the Amidah, where we stand face to face with God and pour out our heart and open up our hearts to that intimate conversation. And everything else was just a lead-in. And people meditate in different ways, and sometimes a repetition of a certain word over and over again becomes a form of cleansing the mind to get us ready for focusing intensively on those two prayers. And I think that's a lot of where that mumbling davening comes No, I usually, not usually, I always say the words that are there. But sometimes I will, in my own davening, especially when I literally daven on my own outside of a minyan, is I may pick a certain prayer and repeat it over and over and over again. Kind of like when we do the contemplative circle and we chant something over and over and over again in a meditative form, instead of having to, recite all of the tefillah. And even when I'm davening in Kehillah, sometimes I'll say during Sukkot Zimra, I'm going to focus my attention and intention on 2 or 3 tefillot and really pay attention to those and let go of the need to have to say and recite everything in the Siddur.
And my approach towards prayer is Pirkei Avot, im ein kavanah ein tefillah. If there's no intention, there's no prayer. And they understand that tension between keva, the fixed prayer, and kavanah. And once you make something keva fixed, you run the risk of the kavanah. And in rabbinic times, they had much more permissiveness to do their own prayers. Like, you get the prayer, as long as you did the Hatimah, the conclusion, you could redo it in whatever language you wanted to the theme of that prayer. There were times in which, like, once it becomes fixed, what Rabbi Karen just said, like, then they go like, oh, I guess that's the way you have to do it, because somebody wrote it down. And there are different ways and different traditions of how you do it, we see. And so is it the only right way? So for me, look, I will sometimes, I know the prayers that I really think, like, I've got to do word by word. And there's others in which, if I get lost in the kavanah, I'm lost. Right? If I can just feel it, and I'm somehow in another place, I leave those words. And then I think that for me, that's what prayer. Rambam asked this question. Rambam, the great rationalist. So the question is, should we really have sacrifices or not? Should we return to sacrifices?
Yeah, no.
Anybody want to vote for return to sacrifices? Anybody? Anybody?
I'm off the shul train.
Okay. Like,
get a lunch out of it, so.
The sacrifice. So, right, Maimonides, who said, by the way, who talked about all these sacrifices. Jonathan, I don't want to know. It was Maimonides was such a rationalist, and he talked about prayer to God. And does God? He believed, by the way, that God only commanded sacrifices in the Torah because we were not prepared to separate ourselves from the ways of the sacrifices. Right? The ideal form is avodat halev. And by the way, isn't just, I would say, isn't prayer, but it's actually, does God need our words? No. And here's where the Hasidim actually were, like, they brought it to another level. They were into the Kavanah. And they were seen as kooks. Like, now they're seen as the authentic Judaism. That's a great irony, I guess. They're seen as being, right, the authentic Jewish experience. But in truth, the Baal Shem Tov was excommunicated. But then he did the favor back to the Vilna Gaon, the ancestors of Rabbi Shochet, right? And excommunicated each other. But they understood the idea of kavanah, and I think in prayer, if you don't struggle with that, if you don't try and leave the words, I think actually, and if you're only limited to those words, I think that's a problem. I'll give you one more. Why do we do a full repetition of the Amidah in some communities? Because in ancient time, right? By the way, through most of the time, people didn't have books. When do people get books? Gutenberg, right? So only the wealthy could afford it. And so you didn't have a siddur. And what happened was that you had silent prayers, but if you didn't know it, and if you certainly didn't have a book, they would recite the prayers. You'd be able to say amen, and you'd be able to do that. Since the advent of books, the question is, right, what is that efficacious nature of a full repetition other than it's an important tradition for those who keep it. I don't want to belittle it at all. I just want to put it in a historical context of where things develop, and we're really good about adding things, Rabbi Cameras, and we never take things away. Yeah. Never. I've never seen a prayer book, right, which like that traditional one where they'll take it out. Anyway, there was a question here maybe. Do you remember?
During
What's that? I'm sorry, repeat the question, sorry. No, it's my fault, it's my hearing, go ahead.
Most of the time I'm at temple, I kind of space out.
You kind of space out,
I think about other things.
right?
And it's not related towards the prayers. And even when I don't say them, I still benefit from standing for all of them.
So do you still benefit from standing for all of them? That's it. It's a great question.
Or when you say amen, is it really?
By the way, only teenagers would have the courage to share that, right? Because I look out there, a lot of people going like, just so you know, there are people going like, that's me. You know, I'm thinking about the break fast. I'm thinking about tomorrow what I got to do.
And then also, like, when you say amen, does it really make up for the prayer you didn't say?
So look, making up for prayers. Look, does it make up for prayers that you don't say? Like, the whole idea about prayer and what it means to you, and we're gonna have 9 different approaches between the two of us, right? I'm not sure how you answer as well. There is this idea of praying 3 times a day. And those prayers were modeled, by the way, after the sacrifices in the temple. The morning, the afternoon, and the evening, which is why, if you don't know, it wasn't a sacrifice in the evening. They would clean up the altar. That's why we don't do the Amidah. One of the reasons we don't do the Amidah loud in the Mari evening service is because it was seen as kind of an optional service, if you will. And so there is this idea. Rabbi Elliot Dorff said this, I think, well, as I recall. See, we have the prayers there to help get us to real prayer. Sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't. But we do it with the hope that we'll get there. So it doesn't mean that your prayers are in vain or anything else. It just means, like, we acknowledge how hard it is to get to a prayerful state. It's really hard. So what's happening to you is actually what's normal. And we have to try and push ourselves into it. And I think that's where davening comes from in part, Hasidic tradition. That really, you're trying to feel it. You're trying to get rid of everything else. You're trying to focus on yourself and change what you're doing. But it's a beautiful question, and I think everybody should struggle with it.
So if we say amen, we get the benefit of the prayer?
If you say amen, by the way, in Alexandria, I think it was so big that they couldn't even hear to the back of the temple there, and they had to have the flags that they would wave so that people would say amen. You want to?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts. Number one is, in a world in which there is a strong feeling of obligation that I have to do these things, but I can't do them on my own, the amen is a great gift. It's a tool to say that though I may not know the words, I may not have the kavanah that the person who's leading it has, my amen says, whatever it is that you're saying, whatever it is that you're doing, count me in on it, even though I don't have that capability. That's a real gift. When it comes to our own work in prayer, I always like to compare it to great baseball players. Great hitters used to be able to, not in the world of pitching today, but great hitters, the greatest hitters, would, on average, get on base. Not hit a home run, but get on base how often?
1 in 3.
Right? 30% of the time they would get on base, not getting, hitting it out of the ballpark. That means that the best athletes failed 70% of the time. To get to become a best athlete, what did you need to do? You needed to practice every day. You needed to spend an enormous amount of time in the gym. You needed to learn about your opposing pitchers. You needed to understand the ballpark that you were playing in. You needed to do so many things just to fail 70% of the time. So too with prayer. If we want to succeed in prayer, right, how much time do we spend learning what it is that we are saying? Not in the moment of the prayer service, but outside of the prayer service. How fluent do we become in the prayer so that we can mumble them But know that in that mumbling, we're actually saying what we mean and meaning what we are saying. How much of the Hebrew have we mastered? All of the work that is expected to be done before we actually get into the moment where we're praying. That's why prayer is probably the most challenging thing that humans engage in, because it requires so much advanced preparation to actually feel the spirit of the moment. So what I would say is such a beautiful question that you asked, and I really do, as Rabbi Vogel said, believe that it speaks to everybody's challenges here. And I would say the answer is, if you can just take a couple of moments in any prayer service that you are in, and hold on for a few moments to a word, to a thought, that's kavanah. And that's getting on to first base or second base. Right? The more we work on it, the more likely we will have those moments of a home run. But we have to keep doing it all the time in order to get those moments.
Yeah, I want to thank you for it's beautiful about the Amen. It's really a beautiful perspective of putting it in. And I want to respond, like, now I'm thinking about your question, like, it's just showing up matter as well, right? That, and I think it matters the intention of showing up. I think you can take it from the prophet this morning, Isaiah. God doesn't want our fast if it's not meaningful, if it's not going to translate into something. So if you're coming to synagogue just because you want credit, that would be different than coming and saying, I want to have an experience, but I get distracted, and but I want that. That would be the approach that would be really well received in terms of, like, should be where we all start.
Yeah, and you just taught me something else that's important. Sometimes we come to synagogue in order to allow other people to pray. Right? I may not have the space in my head to pray, but I know that if I'm the 10th, I allow the other 9 people who are here to be able to pray. And my presence is just as important being here, even if I don't have the kavanah. And that's equally important.
Yeah, you should see in the morning for the minyan where there's a WhatsApp, and sometimes it'll be, need one more in the chapel to make minyan. And that one person, whether they're coming with kavanah or not, help ensure the prayers of others. Brandon, you have one?
Yeah, sort of leading on with a similar question. We're talking about about actually doing the prayers and, like, being active in it, but then there's a point of doing them, and there's a point of understanding and internalizing them, and it's and there's like so.
You just hit a nerve because, like, how many of you understand the prayers when we're doing them? How many of you actually how many think you understand the basic concepts and what's taking place in the prayer? Raise your hand. So we're talking about 5 to 10% here.
And then it's not only like understanding what the words are saying, but actually taking meaning from it, and then I also wanted to go back to the thing we were saying about the Aramaic and Hebrew thing. I find it interesting that with the Kaddish they put it in the Aramaic, but then with the 2 most important prayers, maybe not subjective to say important, but with the, like, 2 big prayers, the Shema and Amidah, those were in the Hebrew. Those were not as easy.
And they actually don't have to be done in Hebrew to fulfill the mitzvah. Rabbi Cameron, how many are there? 5 prayers that need to be done in Hebrew? Only Birkat Kohanim. There's
Birkat Kohanim, not the Amidah.
Right. Yeah. Shema is in Hebrew because it's fulfillment. See, it's interesting. It's not a prayer technically. It's fulfillment of the obligation. Kriyat Shema. It's called the reading of the Shema. So you're supposed to read that section. But what we forget is the rabbis, and we really aren't doing it. It's interesting how it changed over time. The early rabbis wanted us to understand the prayers. And I think that's reflected in the Aramaic, their willingness to change the language. Later on, Hebrew becomes, and by the way, I prefer reading it in Hebrew, Even though I do understand it even before I did, because it felt sacred. I felt connected to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Like I felt connected to tradition. It enhanced my prayer and spiritual experience. Much like people who do meditation, and it's not anything that makes sense necessarily, but it's a mantra, a chant, and things like that. So for me, Hebrew can do that. And for many people, I think you would say, doing it in Hebrew, you feel it. You feel from generation to generation, going back thousands of years. But that's why you'll see us sometimes translate things in English. My tradition over years has been, even that Al-Khair, some of you are the other services, to do it in English. Because I think of when people rush to and do the Al-Khair, I don't think they're quite understanding what they mean. And finding good language as well. So we struggle. Everybody struggles about, like, do I have to do it in Hebrew? What do you do? To know, if you do your prayers in English, except for the couple we talked about, they are as acceptable as doing them in Hebrew, honestly.
Now, that being said, when I do look at the English of the prayer when we're doing it, I find that it's almost harder for me to be doing those prayers because
Then you should be
being able to understand them.
So do it. By the way, I used to say, well, read the English. Right? Like the English sometimes is like, it's a horrible, it's much more an impediment to real spirituality, the English. So here's my answer is, and I want to get a couple more questions, is that for me, like we talked about, there's an obligation felt for doing all those words by prayer for me as well. It's finding what prayer means and finding that kavanah, and I think for me, that's different for each person. So you can only find your way in how that's going to work. All right, who didn't I get, Sheldon?
We pray for the rebuilding of the temple. What do we mean it?
It's interesting, in the conservative movement, Sidor and Maxor, there's an alternative version that doesn't focus on the rebuilding of the temple. So, is that the question?
Yeah, because like you ask about the sacrifices. I want the temple rebuilt, but I don't want to hear animal sacrifices.
And that's why there are some of the conservative movement that said it's inauthentic to offer those prayers and to talk about rebuilding the temple. Maimonides, how did Maimonides envision that the temple being rebuilt? It's going to come down from heaven.
Oh, with plumbing and electricity.
Right. By the way, which resolves the whole issue of the obligation to rebuild it, and Maimonides understood all of that. So the idea of rebuilding, the rabbis talked, by the way, in the Mishnah and Talmud, Rabbi Cameron, they talk as if the sacrifice is going to be reinstituted, and yet on the other hand, they didn't think it would happen as well. There's a sense of hope. Let's take one. I think we take one more. Steve Springer.
Yeah, but the idea of when sacrifices disappeared, how did that happen? Over a long period of time?
So it is interesting. So there is a disbelief. So the question is, when did sacrifices disappear? There is a misconception that when the temple is destroyed, the day that it was destroyed in 70 CE, that sacrifices stopped and prayer began. Prayer began long before that. The Talmud describes, I think, 300 B'tei Knesset that were in and around the Israel area. So see, they were already knowing that if you couldn't go up to sacrifice, that there's another way that you come to God and in relationship and prayer became developed. There was also prayer early on in the temple, underneath in the lower chamber where they were to recite Birkat Kohanim and some other prayers. So it stops in 70 CE, but prayer is not the prayer just was imagined then. It existed, thank God, because otherwise there could have been a theological crisis. Prayers existed, and then they just had to grab out. And by the way, that was the part of the Pharisees being victorious over the Sadducees in the fall of the temple, that the rabbinic era really began in fullness, even though it starts like the 1st century BCE rabbinic period. And part of the temple structure is the fighting going on. The Sadducees, Pharisees, the Sicarii. There was such internal warfare between the Israelites, but that was the end of the Sadducees, as I understand it. Rabbi Kieran.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were speaking, what's the very first lesson of the Talmud, right? Post-destruction world. The very first lesson in Mishnah Brachot is Me matai korina tashma. From what time do I need to recite the morning or the evening Shema? So it's interesting that our tradition, post-rabbinic, begins with this idea of prayer, And even though it connects in the Mishnah to events that took place during the period of the temple, the rabbis so fully understood that sacrifice and the rebuilding of the temple was not going to be done in their lifetime or a result of their work, that it became metaphoric and symbolic, and the real work of rebuilding the temple and the sacrifices is about the words that we bring and the meaning behind our words and the way in which prayer elevates us, creates community and connection with one another. And that was the intention of the rabbis from the outset.
Yeah, it's amazing how Judaism has evolved throughout time, and we need to continue that evolution, I believe, of Judaism. I think to just hold on and to say it's always been done like this is not the Jewish way. The Jewish way has actually been to evolve and to make sure that you are relevant. And that's where we try to experiment. We try to figure things out. Holding on to tradition and figuring out how do we bring new relevance. Questions are always the best part of this. One time I had somebody call me, who was considering conversion and started asking me questions, lots of questions. And he says, I need the answers. And I said, if you want answers, we may be the wrong religion for you. I said, because every question you ask and every answer I give you is just going to give you 2 or 3 more questions. And so if you like questions, then we're your team. And he ended up not only converting, became a rabbi. But questions are really important. So as you think about them, if you want to send an email, just type it out and send it to Rabbi Cameras. We would love to. But no, seriously, if you ever have a question, email us. If you ever want to come in, our favorite time is coming in and meeting with congregants and being able to share issues and to figure things out. And that's what rabbis is the best times that we have. Anyway, we're going to go mincha in about 10 minutes, and tzom call for everybody. Although you're not supposed to have an easy fast. I don't know why we say that. Do you know you're not supposed to have an easy fast? It's supposed to be hard. What are you supposed to eat the night before the fast? You're supposed to have 2 meat dishes with lots of salt in it. And you're supposed to, really? They didn't go light on the carbs and that's not the rabbis. They didn't go. Let's make it challenging for you so you feel it. Anyway, may you have a meaningful fast, and we'll continue our services shortly.